Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if the Shinobi Alliance read Naruto and RWBY. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Millwood and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Naruto Uzumaki frowned in concentration as he once more began to examine the seal matrix that his old sensei, Kakashi Hatake, had brought him to look at. It was odd, some sort of design which neither of them had seen before. It had only been a week or so after the end of the Fourth Shinobi War, and Kakashi had been cleaning out the old basement that sat below the Hokage's tower. It was almost time for Kakashi to take the mantle of Hokage, and he had decided to do something that had not been done since the office was created: clean out the storage room that the Hokage used. It was a personal storage meant only for the one who would sit in the seat, and the only reason he had felt comfortable with Naruto in the room was due to the fact that he was sure that Naruto would easily take the position after him. It was during their cleaning of the room that Kakashi had stumbled onto a very old sealing tag that he had not recognized. He and Naruto had to go through everything, making sure it was safe to be thrown away or destroyed if not, and the sealing tag was something that he had immediately brought towards the attention of his ex-student. The man was, after all, the best seal master that Konoha had. Naruto had quirked an eyebrow upon seeing it before double-taking in its direction. Not even he could decipher the complexities that this seal was, and because of that he had cleared a portion of the floor and began to study it. Truth be told, it was the most complex thing he had ever seen. The only portion that he had been able to make out was some sort of space-time paradox that easily outclassed his father's Hurration. "How's the seal going, Naruto?" At the call of his sensei, the blonde man turned his head towards the man before the frown on his face became stronger. "I don't get it at all, Databeo. I've studied the works of my father, mother, Jiraiya, and even Uzumaki Mito. None of what I have ever seen even comes close to the seal, and I'm kinda curious to see what it'll do." Kakashi frowned at that. "Naruto, we have no clue where that seal came from, and activating it would be a terrible idea. You should not even consider doing something like that." As soon as the words left his mouth, Kakashi's eyes widened. He had just made the mistake of telling Naruto Uzumaki to not do something. The teenager was as pig-headed as they came, and as the masked man saw the grin begin to stretch at the hero's mouth, he knew that he had fucked up. "Naruto, don't!" His cries were met with nothing but a blinding light as Naruto sent some of his chakra through the seal, already determining that it was non-lethal. When the light died down, there was no sign of either student or sensei, both having disappeared with the light that was now vacant from the dank basement. Blake Belladonna let out a slight sigh as she perused the large bookshelf that resided within the establishment known as the Sage's Tome Trade. It was a store that she was not as familiar with as Tuscan's, but it was the only other store in the city of Vale that had a similar enough reputation as Tuscan's that she did not mind shopping at it. Her favorite bookstore, which was situated so much closer to the Bullhead station that she used to go to and fro from Beacon Academy, had recently been closed, and she had been forced to look for an alternative. As far as the black-haired girl's knowledge went, the Sage's Tome Trade was the only other bookstore in all of Vale that had an equal selection and treated Faunus as kindly as Tuscan had. Her keen eyes narrowed at the thought. Of course, Faunus' acceptance was the higher priority on the list, but she refused to shop at a store that did not have a decent selection. As Blake continued to go through the books that resided within the fiction portion of the store, a light frown began to form on her face. There was a great deal here, and the girl found herself in need of possible assistance in choosing a book of her preference. She turned away from the shelf, making her way towards the front of the store. As she approached the counter, she couldn't help but smile at the visage of the man that sat behind it. She had heard rumors of him and his strange appearance before, but the girl truthfully found it to be rather fresh. Perhaps he just belonged to a stranger species of faunus than herself, but his appearance could be called anything but inconspicuous. The man was pale, deathly so, and had short cropped white hair sitting atop his head and a beard that brushed the counter. It was so long. His eyes were a deep purple, lacking sclera, and two horns sat atop his head. He looked up from the large and foreign book that he had been reading as Blake approached him, a small smile framing his face. "Hello, young miss, and welcome to my shop. Is there anything that I can help you with?" The elderly man offered the girl a small smile, one that she returned eagerly. He seemed so welcoming, so kind. At the same time, there was an intelligence and wisdom that he seemed to exude, something that she had never seen before. She nodded her head before she held up a book that she carried with her. Ninjas of Love being her favorite title, it was subject to being carried around with her. "Yes, I was hoping that you would be able to recommend something similar to this book. A piece of fiction." The old man nodded as he closed the old piece that sat in front of him, the book being fashioned to the name of the store, a legitimate tome. He did not walk from out behind the counter like she had expected. No, instead the man leaned down and produced an old novel from the recesses that she could not see. It was old and leather-bound. The book itself had a rather nondescript title and no cover art. "Remnants Maelstrom Shinobi," it read. The title of the book was the only thing present on the front, and it appeared to be done in some sort of beautiful gold leafing. As Blake opened to the first page, she once more felt the age of the book in front of her. Brown were the pages, oxidized over the years since it had been printed. The book was truly beautiful, a patronage to the arts before heavy printing had been available. I want you to have this book, Blake Belladonna, the old man said as he turned around to straighten something out behind him. It will cost you nothing, but I request that you read this title with some friends or family perhaps. It is a good group read that I highly recommend that follows the tale of a shinobi. You know them by their more street name, ninja. As the man finished, Blake's eyes practically shone with excitement, but something was stopping her. This was an old book, and that meant that it had great collector value. She couldn't so easily take something that didn't belong to her, that she had not worked to pay for. As the old man caught sight of her imminent protest, he raised his hand. Do not worry too much about it. If you are concerned about the value of the book, simply return it to me when you are finished with it. I like to put my faith in the young generation, and I will put my faith in you. As he finished, he lifted the larger book with both hands and passed it to the wide-eyed girl. Blake took it gently, almost lovingly, as she held the book close to herself. Offering the man a final goodbye, she ran out of the store, already more than happy to share the novel with her friends at Beacon. This could be a good way to distract them from the up-and-coming Vital Festival, and it would be much-needed break for both teams RWBY and JNPR. As she made her way out of the building, she missed the wince from the old man. Good thing she didn't notice me call her by name, the man spoke aloud, alone once more within his store. A smile graced his face once again as he walked to the front of the building and produced a closed sign to put on the storefront. His work here was done, and he could not wait to see the product of his meddling. As Blake returned to her dorm room, she was greeted with the sight of her team lounging around doing nothing. As she closed the door behind her, she noticed her team leader perk up and turn her way before speaking. Blake, where were you today? We had practice with John and his team earlier, but we couldn't find you. Are you okay? As the diminutive team leader entered Blake's personal space, firing off far too many questions in such a short amount of time, the taller of the two smiled at the team leader. It wasn't a grin or anything large, but a small smile from Blake Belladonna did convey a great deal. As the smile framed Blake's face, Ruby instantly quieted, intent on learning why her friend was in such a good mood. Sorry for not being able to make it to practice on time, Ruby, but I was going to get some literature. The bookstore that I have been using has currently been closed, and I had to go across town in order to shop at a different one. The girl nodded her head, but became rather surprised when Blake produced an old novel from her backpack in order to show it to the girl. It was old, like really old. Ruby couldn't stop herself from lightly tracing her fingers over the leather cover as she read the title. Remnants Maelstrom Shinobi? As the youngest girl snapped out of her own thoughts, she idly noted that Weiss and Jan had moved in order to join the two at the front of the room. They most likely desired to know what the commotion was about as well. I've never heard of that title before. It seems to be near ancient, and well preserved as well. We had some books of similar age in the Shini library back home, but even ours were not in such good condition. Once again Blake felt her lips tug upwards as she watched her team look at the book in curiosity. You know, the man who gave it to me wanted me to read it with my friends. At her question, all of her teammates looked rather surprised, but name came as close to Ruby. The girl's eyes were practically shining in excitement at the prospect. Can we start now? Can we, Blake? The whine sounded cuter than just about anything, and Blake easily relented. It wasn't as if this was not her plan to begin with. Alright, Ruby, just go and see if Team JNPR wants to join, and then we can start. Blake had not even finished her sentence when Ruby disappeared from sight. A flurry of rose petals was the only thing left in her wake. Immediately returning with John, who seemed quite struck, and the rest of his team shortly behind, she looked to Blake with bated breath. What's all the commotion about? The blonde boy could only rub his head as he familiarized with his setting. 1 minute he had been in his bed, and the next he had appeared inside of Ruby's dorm. We were just about to start story time, and Blake had asked Ruby to inform your team. Instead, she appears to have forcibly dragged you here before asking. The comment came from Weiss as she looked at her team leader, who was now scratching her head. The girl seemed to be blatantly disregarding the semantics, and was already seated and ready to begin reading. As no one from JNPR voiced any kind of concerns, Blake opened the book to the first page. As she did so, she, her team, and JNPR were all met with a blinding light. As quick as it came, it was gone. But as Blake's eyes readjusted, she quickly realized that they were no longer in the training ground. As she quickly scanned the small room that they were currently in, she began to think that they may no longer be in Beacon Academy. The room was white, terrifyingly so, and was only accented by 2 white couches, a white-stained table, and a wall-mounted television. Granted, there was a hallway, but she was more concerned with why someone had hired Weiss as an interior decorator. It seemed to not matter that she was reluctant to explore, as Ruby immediately zoomed down the hallway and back, using her semblance in order to get her there faster. As she returned, she frowned and quickly pouted before speaking. Where are we? The hallway only leads to a kitchen, a bathroom, and a couple of bedrooms. She seemed frantic, at least until Yang put a hand on her shoulder. Her sister didn't say anything, but Blake could tell that the girl was easily looking out for threats. Guys, I think you should get a look at the TV. This time it was John who spoke, and as each of them turned towards the television, all of them began to spook a little bit. Wait for the final members before reading the book. The words displayed on the television, and all of the currently residing students began to grow wary of the room that they were currently trapped in. That was the case until they were once more blinded by a light very similar to the initial one that hit. Once it died down, all of the present students of Beacon Academy were met with a man who could have been the missing brother of Professor Ozpin smacking a blonde boy rather hard upside the head. Idiot! You have no idea what that seal was and you so carelessly activated it. That could have been something left over from the Warring States days when the Shodaime took the office. Now where the hell are we? As the man finished, letting out a rather indignant huff, he turned towards the rest of the people in the room. He only blinked slowly before he lazily raised his hand towards the group. Yo, the man began. None of you would happen to know where it is that we are, would you? As his questions finished, all students of Beacon Academy shook their heads in negativity, causing the masked man to let out a long sigh. Great, just great. Looks like you've gone and gotten us trapped somewhere, Naruto. As he finished, the man walked over towards the couch, sitting down on it, and tried to change the channel on the television with the controls. The oldest in the room began, causing everyone to look in his direction. What's this television saying about reading a book? As all students turned towards the television, they found that the stranger was indeed correct. Instead of the previously seen message, a new one was displayed for all the occupants. Finish introductions and then begin to read. Yang Xiaolong simply shrugged her shoulders as she read the message. As far as the adrenaline-seeking teenager was concerned, she might as well just go with the flow. She quickly extended her arm towards her fellow blonde, who was still on the ground clutching his head, before she introduced herself. Hey there! The name's Yang Xiaolong, and don't you forget it. As she said this, she helped hoist the boy onto his feet, giving him a large grin that could almost the boy's own. The name's Naruto Uzumaki, and the same goes for you, Databeo. As soon as the resident brawler of Team RWBY had given her introduction, the rest of her team seemed quick to follow. Ruby quickly raised her hand, waving at the boy, before she smiled brightly. I'm Yang's sister, and I'm Ruby Rose. It's nice to meet you. Naruto smiled at the young girl, quickly returning her wave with one of his own. She seemed genuine, and that was something that the boy had always respected. It was hard to find people like that in a world of shinobi. With their introductions out of the way, Ruby and Yang quickly went over to sit at the table, each giving Kakashi a wave as they passed him by. As Naruto turned back towards the large group of individuals, the next one to introduce themselves left him rather confused. I am Wise Schnee, heiress of the Schnee Dust Company, the white-themed girl began, giving a small curtsy as she did so. The boy nodded his head, offering a small bow, before the girl went and joined her friends at the table. Naruto's mannerisms may have been rough, but if Granny Tsunade had ever caught wind of him treating a possible foreign dignitary with disrespect, well, he was not sure what would come to pass. All he knew is that he didn't want any of it. The black-haired girl with the bow atop her head nodded in his direction as she followed the Schnee girl past him. Blake Belladonna was all the girl offered before joining the other three. Truthfully, the cat Faunus had been rather afraid as to what was happening. The book given to her by the store owner had done this, and she was rather confused as to why. Naruto just chuckled lightly to himself. He was slightly miffed at the lack of attention that she had given, but was easily able to figure that her mind must be elsewhere. It was then that he turned towards his fellow blonde, only this one was very much so taller than he was. Extending his hand, he clasped his with the individual. Name's John Ark. As that introduction finished, John made his way over towards the couch, sitting at the opposite end as Kakashi. The gray-headed man offered him a lazy wave as he slowly pulled a familiar orange book from his shinobi pouch and began to read. Pira Nikos, four-time consecutive winner of the Mistral Regionals, clapped her hands together and offered a beautiful smile to the blonde in front of her. Hello, the girl began, her voice coming out cheery. I'm Pira, nice to meet you. Naruto offered the girl a small smile and an awkward wave as she went to join her team leader on the couch. He smiled as he watched the girl sit next to John and begin speaking to him so animatedly. As he returned his sight to the last two individuals that he had not met yet, he offered them a small smile and a brief apology. Sorry about that, but she looks very similar to my mother. They both nodded their heads before a grin split the girl's face. Oh, run! We should totally go and get some pancakes when we are done here. I heard the diner that we go to in Vale now uses some even higher quality maple syrup. The dark-haired man that was wearing the green tailcoat simply sighed lightly. I'm Lyrin and this is Nora Valkyrie. It's a pleasure to meet you. He offered a light bow as grabbed Nora and made his way over to the opposing couch. Naruto just chuckled lightly to himself as he made his way over next to Kakashi, sitting next to the man, but still having a space between himself and Pira. It was then that the instruction on the television began to fade away, being replaced by new ones. Begin to read the book. Take turns per chapter. The fridge in the kitchen and the pantry are stocked in need of meals. What book exactly is he talking about? The question from Naruto had everyone turning to face him once more before Ruby produced the old book from seemingly nowhere. This book, she began, only for Naruto to raise an eyebrow in question. Well, the boy began before shrugging his shoulders. Who wants to read the first chapter? As the words left his mouth, all eyes from the remnant crowd turned towards one Blake Belladonna. She initially figured it must be someone or something behind her, so she too turned to look. Once she did, she realized that she was the center of attention, and let out a short sigh to herself. Holding out her hand, Ruby passed her the book, a triumphant smile on the young girl's face. Blake coughed, clearing her throat before she began with the first chapter. Remnant's Maelstrom Shinobi Chapter 1. The City of Vale. One of the four major cities of Remnant that stood as a symbol of mankind's perseverance and ingenuity. It, along with its sister cities, cast a light of hope into the hearts of people around the world, showing the world that no amount of grim or disaster could eliminate the human spirit so long as one light shone through the dark. Oi, not to interrupt, Kakashi began. But what exactly is a grim? As the question was raised, a visual representation of several more well-known grim displayed on the television. A pack of Beowulf in one frame before shifting to a large Ursa Major. They are the creatures against humanity. Their only goal is to eradicate humanity from the face of the earth. Weiss sighed as the words left her mouth. It is believed that they appeared shortly after the dawn of mankind and did everything that they could to destroy us. But we were able to learn and adapt, fighting back through the use of our semblance and aura. As Weiss finished her lengthy history lesson, Yang grinned next to her. Calm down there, nerd. Don't want to give the masked man an aneurysm. Weiss quickly turned red but ignored the obvious bait from her blonde teammate. Huffing and turning away from the blonde, it became apparent that she was done with this discussion. Blake simply sighed before she began again. As a major capital, Vale boasted one of the largest shopping districts, as well as numerous smaller settlements, that lay on the outskirts of the sprawling city. At the heart of Vale was the prestigious Beacon Academy. It was here at Beacon that the defenders of Vale were trained to combat the forces of darkness. These defenders, normal men and women, who had chosen to dedicate their lives to keeping Vale and her citizens safe, were called huntsmen and huntresses. Wielding their own unique weapon alongside their equally unique power known as semblance, these warriors were to be the first and last line of defense against those that would wish to harm the citizens of their city. They were to be symbols unto themselves, symbols of strength, pride, and hope. Similar to the Ninja Academy, Naruto noted to his sensei. Sure enough, the man nodded his own head in agreement. He may be a rather lazy individual, but that would not stop him from stealing possible lesson plans from the instructors and using and implementing them within Konoha. He gave Naruto a look of gratitude as the blonde handed him a notebook and pencil. The blonde was only saving himself the effort of designing academy curriculum down the line when he inevitably became Hokage. It was here at the entrance to Beacon Academy that we find a tall and well-built teen admiring the massive structure that was the academy. The teen surveyed the building with blue eyes so intense that they seemed to be like twin pools of the ocean itself. 3 marks that resembled whisker marks marked his tan face on each cheek. Blonde hair as gold as the sun fell in messy spikes around his head, the bangs falling across his forehead, further accentuating his electric blue eyes. The blonde was garbed in clothing that seemed fitting of a warrior ready to march on to the battle lines. A plain black shirt with some sort of swirl in a burnt orange color on the chest clung to his top half. Overtop the shirt was a black jacket with the same swirl on each shoulder. The top part of the shoulder was covered by some form of white armor. The back of the jacket as well as some parts of the front were dotted with the same pieces of white armor. Covering his bottom half was a pair of plain gray pants. On his left thigh was a black pouch. Laying horizontally attached to his belt was a small and plain-looking scroll. Covering his feet was a pair of black leather boots with the ends of his pants tucked into the ankle-high footwear. Standing at a solid 6 foot with a lithe build, the blonde would have struck an imposing figure if not for the twitching of his eye and the fluffy orange furred fox kit wrapped around his neck like a scarf. Naruto's eyes went wide as the book finished describing him. They don't tell me that this book is going to follow me. His shout was indignant and bothered. Of course it would be. Who would desire for others to be able to read their personal thoughts? Next to him, Kakashi snickered. He was all the more ready to continue taking notes on the story that he would be able to use against his protege as revenge for getting him stuck in this situation to begin with. The blonde's eyebrow twitched erratically as Blake ignored him and continued to read the story. Remind me again why the hell I have to go to school again, Kurama? The blonde asked aloud, voice dripping in annoyance. At that revelation, Naruto became interested. Not in school, nah screw school, but in being able to conjure a body for Kurama to walk around in. If he could escape the boundaries of the seal, that would be extremely nice. I agree, Kit. It would be nice to stretch my limbs once in a while. A voice in Naruto's mind rang out, Naruto already knowing it was Kurama speaking. Some would think the teen crazy for talking to himself, however that was far from the case. The fox that lay around his neck stirred and allowed one of its closed eyelids to crack open, revealing ruby red eyes. Shaking its head in a very human show of exasperation, a gruff male voice rang through the blonde's head, because it seems to be both the easiest and best way to get a job and possibly some answers. Besides, it should be easier since you have done this before. Also, don't talk out loud, you dumbass, people will think you're nuts. Everyone from Beacon had their eyes wide like dinner plates, and were having a bit of trouble picking out words to even try to react to what was currently going on. Did that fox just talk? More accurately, use telepathy? Rin queried. Yes, he did. It'll be a thing explained later. For now, just roll with it. Naruto explained. Works for me. Blake stopped reading as she, and everyone else, turned towards Nora and Rin. The boy simply facepalmed before shaking his head in mild exasperation. Please continue, Blake. The request came out more urgent than intended, but it was easy enough to tell why. Nora herself simply shrugged her shoulders, not exactly understanding the situation. A sigh escaped the teen's lips before his head fell in resignation. But I hated school then, and I doubt this will be any different from the academy back in Konoha. That may well be true, but keep in mind that despite the situation not changing, you have changed, Naruto. And for Kami's sake, please don't act a fool. I think we've suffered one lifetime too many of that, the voice replied back. Ruby couldn't help but send the sitting blonde a sympathetic look. She too hated school and she could easily sympathize with anyone who held sentiments similar to her own. The boy simply sent her a thumbs up and a grin, making her smile in a way similar to his. Kami? Yan questioned, her head tilted to the side, wondering what that meant. Kami, Kakashi began, is another word for a god, deity, divinity, or spirit. Many times when used it is referring to the concept of gods, so it's basically another way of saying God. Oh, that makes sense, Ruby surmised. Stretching his limbs, the now named Naruto sighed again and folded his arms behind his head. Wasn't exactly my decision. Not my fault those teachers were too bigoted to actually teach me properly. Fair point, Kit, but you also weren't exactly helping yourself by acting like an idiot either. Touché, Kurama, touché. It was Kakashi's turn to frown. He had learned during his initial gauging of skill of Team 7 that Naruto had been neglected during the academy. The boy should have been far more able than he had been, given his current level of skill. If he struggled with a couple of techniques it would have been okay. But the boy had truly been shafted on the teacher selection for the first couple of years of the academy. Truth be told, Kakashi had a rather good idea of how much Mizuki had jeopardized Naruto's education, and it honestly made the silver-haired man sick. Before the mental conversation between the teen and Fox could continue, they were both startled by a sudden explosion only a few yards away from them. Both raised an eyebrow as they saw a girl about Naruto's age dressed in all white screaming and hollering at a younger girl in red. Oh no! This time it was Ruby's turn to lament her introduction. She pulled her hood above her head, already knowing what was coming. This was not how she wanted to be introduced. Why couldn't it have started when she took down Torchwick? Why did she have to be introduced after exploding? Not only that, but now Yan would get to see what actually happened during her initial meeting with Weiss. She could already see the snickering face of her sister every time she closed her eyes. Oh, the humanity! Their eyebrows ascended even higher as a girl in black interfered on behalf of the girl in red. Naruto felt bad for the younger girl seeing the regally dressed girl in white stomp off with the girl in black quietly sauntering off, leaving the girl in red to fall to her knees in sadness. Feeling sympathetic, Naruto made his way over to the red-themed girl who was muttering to herself about knees, which was rather odd. Good going, Ruby. Your possible knight in shining armor arrives on the scene, and you weird him out by talking about your knees of all things. Yan chided, thinking it was such a wasted opportunity for her sister. It's your fault, Yan. Ruby retorted from within her hood, still a bit salty about what happened on the first day, while Naruto blushed at what Yan was implying. How is it my fault? You were the one that said people would think I was the bee's knees. Then you left me, your own sister, to fend for herself alone. Ruby whined from within her hood, albeit rather dramatically, but still, she had a point. Not one to judge though. Naruto lowered his hand into the girl's vision, offering to help her up. Before Yan could even make a comment, Ruby removed her hood and looked at Naruto with wide, brimming, and tear-stained eyes. If Naruto had been there on that day, would he have come to her aid as well? She was touched and happy, her nervousness already being forgotten as she began to swing her legs in the tall chairs that they were sitting on. The Red Riding Hood look-alike turned curious gray eyes up to the owner of the hand and was slightly surprised to see a rather good-looking blonde offering her help. She took the offered hand and was a little surprised when the teen pulled her to her feet with only a slight tug. Naruto had to resist the urge to slap himself when he noted just how attractive the red-haired girl was. Seems that you inherited your father's love of red hair, any? Kurama chuckled mentally. And just like that, Ruby had already retreated back into her cloak, a defense mechanism similar to that of an ostrich. If she could not see the world, then the world could not see her. Meanwhile on the couch, Naruto's face was lit up in a light blush as well. Sorry, Ruby didn't mean or want to make you feel awkward like that, Naruto said to his new acquaintance. At the sound of a perverse giggle, Naruto turned and glared at his sensei, who was currently grinning at the boy through his mask. He growled out 3 words. Don't you dare. His threat did nothing to his, still grinning, sensei. The man simply turned back towards his notebook, scribbling down a couple of words before looking at Blake. We are ready when you are. As he said the words, Naruto couldn't help but notice the smugness in his sensei's voice. Then and there Naruto Uzumaki swore to himself that he would have the last laugh. Naruto just childishly glared at the cheeky fox. Before he could come up with a rebuttal, the girl whose hand he was still holding spoke up. Thanks for that. Realizing that the girl was asking for his name, Naruto let go of her hand and grinned. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. I don't get it. Is Naruto your first name or your last name? Nora asked Naruto with a curious demeanor. Naruto is my first name. Some cultures, like back home, introduce themselves with their last names first. It's a tradition that mostly only people close to you may call you by your given name, he explained with a shrug. Personally, I never cared much for it. The girl's face lit up in a smile. Nice to meet ya. I'm Ruby Rose. Just look at how adorable my little sister is. Yan glanced over at Ruby only to begin laughing as she saw that her sister had all but vanished inside of her own hood. She had always found teasing her younger sibling to be fun, but this was just too much. The sound of Kurama's snickering echoed in Naruto's head, causing his brow to twitch. Of course, the fox would find her name amusing, though even he had to admit that it was all pretty funny. Red cloak with red highlights? And her name was Ruby Rose? Yeah, it seemed like her parents really wanted her to like the color red or like the story of Little Red Riding Hood a little too much. On the other hand, he wasn't one to talk either. After all, he had gone around in a bright orange jumpsuit for a few years and then spent another 3 or so years in a darker version of that same jumpsuit. Even now his love for the color orange was hard to repress, evident by the rather large swirl on his chest. At that declaration, it was the Schnee who looked at him, disgusted. You would actually wear something like that? That sounds absolutely hideous. Naruto shrugged his shoulders but was rather surprised when someone from the remnant crowd came to his defense. Are you really one to talk, Weiss? I mean, you aren't an atlas anymore. White isn't natural camouflage for you anymore. The white-themed girl turned towards Blake, astonished that she would even say such a thing. Her glare was only returned by the victorious smirk of her teammate before the girl broke eye contact and, once more, began to read. Pushing those thoughts to the back of his mind along with the sounds of a still laughing Kitsune, Naruto offered one of his patented foxy grins. So I take it this is your first year here at Beacon? Ruby nervously chuckled. That obvious, huh? No, all the experienced hunters and huntresses are blowing themselves up with dust, Naruto chuckled. Yan simply elbowed her partner before grinning. This is going to be great. Blake didn't say anything, but her yellow eyes did linger on her team leader. A small smile framed her face as the girl continued to hide, obviously distraught by the unrelenting teasing of her friends and sister. Childishly flailing her arms, Ruby replied back. But it wasn't my fault. I mean, well, I guess it kind of was. But still, it was an accident, and now because of that I won't have any friends and this is gonna be horrible. And Naruto could only barely resist the urge to laugh at the rambling girl. How she was able to talk so fast was a little mind-boggling, but he had seen strangers, so he let her continue to vent out her frustrations. A few minutes later, a slightly winded Ruby blushed as she kicked at the ground, realizing that she had just spilled her guts to a guy she had met all of 5 minutes ago. The thought that he would be too weirded out with her to be her friend crossed her mind. Luckily, before she could go on another worry-induced ramble, Naruto's voice broke through her thoughts. Better? Little bit, Ruby admitted. Now it's time for my entrance, John Arc stated, confident in his call. He had appeared here when he had first met Ruby, and it would only make sense for him to do so here now. Pira sent him a light smile, but no one really acknowledged it. For a few seconds neither said anything, Naruto just standing there still grinning and Ruby still blushing in embarrassment. Then it broke. Laughter overtook the silence and filled the air, the two enjoying the oddness of the situation. When they had regained their breath and were now just chuckling out the last of their laughs, Ruby asked, So you're a returning student here? Naruto flashed her a grin. Nope. A sweat drop trailed down Ruby's head. Wait, so you're a new student like me? Yang Xiaolong erupted into laughter. This time it sounded more like cheers as she listened to Blake read through the rather awkward interactions between her sister and the man that she had only recently met. She usually would not be so relentless in her teasing, but this was simply gold. Yup, Ruby cried crocodile tears. I was hoping you would be able to show me around. Naruto shrugged before folding his arms behind his head. Well, it can't be that hard to get around here, right? John Arc blinked at Blake when she explained the page break that was indicative of the next scene. So, where was I at? At his question, eyes turned towards him, inquisitively. They all knew that this was where John was supposed to make his entrance, and none of them had any idea where it was that he was. The question would only continue to grow in their minds. The gathering of incoming students to Beacon all raised an eyebrow together, as a girl in red came soaring through the open doors of the hall like she had been shot out of a cannon. Lucky for her, she landed in the arms of a busted blonde-haired teen who grinned at her like the situation was normal. The one and only Yang Xiaolong makes her grandiose appearance. The grin that stretched the blonde's face was wide, yet diminished slightly at what she heard next. Thank God there is only one of her. She turned to Weiss, who was currently whispering to Blake. The betrayal, Yam huffed as she flicked her hair, making quite the show of it, as Weiss and Blake erupted into light giggles on the side. She had been betrayed, abandoned for the Schnee. Yang Xiaolong would have to remember that. Ruby! Realizing that she was currently in her sister's arms, Ruby wrapped her arms around the blonde's neck and cried in joy. Yang! I'm so glad to see you. Before anyone could question why Ruby had come through the door via the air, their attention was drawn back to the entrance of the hall, where a blur of yellow raced into the hall before quickly slamming the twin doors shut. There, leaning against the door, panting and out of breath, stood another blonde with a frightened look to him. Even weirder was that a small fox kit was mirroring the blonde, looking equally terrified. Kakashi's eyes were wide in astonishment. His student, the man who defeated Kagaya, and was revered as the strongest ninja of all time, was afraid of something. Kakashi could only let out a shaky breath at the thought. Whatever was attempting to breach that door must have truly been monstrous. Perhaps the strongest of all Grimm had come to challenge an appropriate champion? Ruby hopped out of her sister's arms and rushed the panting blonde, clutching to his chest like he was her husband who had just come back from war. Yang bit her lip, trying desperately to hold in her laughter. Ruby acting like this towards a boy? It was a first. And more importantly, a riot. I thought I'd never see you again, Naruto. Brows were raised even higher as Naruto wrapped his arms around the much smaller girl. Sure, it's okay, Ruby. That thing will never hurt us again. Ruby looked up with a hopeful look shining in her gray eyes. Silver, Ruby's voice corrected. You killed it? Naruto looked away. No. I was barely able to get away from it with my life. Once again Kakashi found himself truly flabbergasted at the thought that his student was so worked up. He found himself truly fearing for the inhabitants of Beacon Academy if Naruto Uzumaki himself would not be able to defeat the enemy. Before the soap opera-like situation could progress any further, Yang shoved her way in between the two before asking the question that was on everyone's mind. Okay, what the hell are you two talking about? And how the heck do you know his guy RWBY? RWBY just grinned and appeared by Naruto's side. This is Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, this is my sister Yang. It appears that the older sister is more similar to a mother hen. The quip came from the place that none had expected. All eyes turned towards Rin, who had a small teasing smile on his face as he looked at Yang. The girl herself looked affronted. She wished to say something, but at the same time she was too proud of Rin to say anything. Ruby's head poked out from her hood as she looked at the exchange in awe. She appeared in front of the sloth-like boy before looking at him, determination sparking in her eyes. Teach me your ways. The boy in question blinked before schooling his own expression. First you must go sit back down. It shall teach you patience, which you will need in order to prep for the time to strike. Ruby nodded her head enthusiastically before, once more, appearing in a flurry of petals in her original position. Naruto chuckled as he nervously waved at his fellow blonde who was inspecting him like a lioness would an unfamiliar creature. He had enough experience with busted blondes to know not to make them angry. That usually lead to a painful beating. Gee, she's almost as big as Tsunade Bachan, Granny Tsunade, and she's like half her age. A lewd grin spread across Yang's face as she turned towards the sitting boy. You like what you see, big boy? Her voice came out seductive as she flashed her eyes demurely and pulled her arms over her head, giving a rather generous display. Have some decency, Yang. The call from the Shini was not able to detract from Naruto's reaction in the slightest. The boy's face turned as red as Pira's hair as he buried his head into his hands. Next to him, Kakashi giggled perversely as his student lamented his terrible luck. Before Naruto could question what the girl was eating to grow such a healthy body, Kurama made himself known by hopping his way up to Naruto's shoulders where he wrapped himself around the blonde's neck. Kid, Kami must love you or something. I mean, you've pretty much spent your whole life living every pervert's dream, surrounded by busted and hot females. Naruto would have normally had a snarky comment to reply back with, but he could find none. The fox was right. His stalker since childhood, Hinata, had blossomed into a beautiful young woman with a pair that could give Tsunade a run for her money. Then there was Tsunade herself, who boasted possibly the largest pair in all of the elemental nations. Both Anko and Kurenai were equally beautiful and as equally gifted in the chest area. Not to mention Cheyenne the priestess, who wanted him to father her children. Of course, who could forget the Mizukage, Water Shadow, Maid Terumi, who had no shame in flirting with him whenever a chance arose. John Arc was the one who whistled this time. The young man was not much of a pervert, but even he had to admit that each and every one of those women were beautiful. Next to him he missed Pira pouting, her bottom lip protruding out slightly as she watched the object of her affections look at the women on the screen. Naruto didn't know whether to cry in frustration or joy. On one hand, he had tried his hardest to not fall to the dark side and become a pervert like every male role model in his life, but it seemed Kami had other plans or just enjoyed tempting him. The females of Remnant all looked at the Uzumaki with respect in their gazes, though they did pity him for the divine being seeming out to corrupt him. Yan even got out of her display of her assets at that. Resigned to his fate, Naruto just stuck out his hand in greeting. Nice to meet you, Yang. Not even bothering to reply to the greeting, the blonde did a total 180 and was instantly invading his personal space bubble and gushing over the cuteness of Kurama. The fox himself was enjoying the attention, only serving to boost his already massive ego. Within his mind, Naruto could hear the fox cackling in delight. Who would have guessed that a large concentration of pure chakra could even be a pervert? It was then that Naruto realized that the thought was entirely moot, his mind drawing back to Matatabi, and how much of a shameless flirt the two-tailed cat could be. Bijou could be perverts just as easily as humans could be. Granted, Naruto knew that none of them came close to his late sensei. Jiraiya had been a pervert above all other perverts, a self-proclaimed super pervert, and he would be remembered as such. It was his legacy, and his spirit would be feared in the hot springs around Hino Kuni for generations to come. I'd like it if you didn't do that. Stupid fox already has a big enough ego. How could such a cute little thing have an ego? Yan cooed in a baby-like voice while cradling Kurama in her arms. The fox was more than enjoying the situation he had found himself in. Kid, I now understand why Jiraiya was a pervert. Naruto could only sigh and pinch the bridge of his nose in frustration, though on the other hand, looking at his fellow blonde, he really couldn't blame the fox. Even he had to admit that the term blonde bombshell fit Yang almost to the letter, and if the metallic bands on her wrist and the smell of gunpowder were anything to go by, the bombshell part may just be literal. Yang blinked at the analysis, her gusto returning to her in full force. Naruto had just made a pun regarding her and her appearance. She was beginning to like him more and more already. With the excitement over, the hall descended back into the chatter of friends, and the group was left to their own devices without having to worry about having the whole freshman class eyes on them. Of course, both Yang and Naruto were the type of people who could care less what other people thought of them, and RWBY wasn't focusing on the background people enough to care. As the group of 3, plus 1 fox, chatted and got to know each other, Yan found herself actually enjoying the company of her fellow blonde. Far too often would guys chase after her and her sister, and spend that time simply ogling them like creeps. She knew her outfit didn't exactly help, but not only was it easy to move and it also gave her an advantage over those perverts who would stare at her chest in the middle of a battle. Ah, the old Anko Midarashi's skimpy clothing technique, eh? Kakashi grinned at that. The oldest of the group had spent a great deal of time with Konoha's resident snake mistress. She had been only 2 years his junior, but had graduated over half a decade later than him from the academy, as he had graduated at 6. Naruto shivered at the mention of the scary snake lady even after all this time, after all these years. He still found her to be one of the most terrifying individuals in all of Konoha. Inquisitive eyebrows raised from the remnant crowd at the mention of this individual, but none asked. They had seen Naruto's initial reaction, and truth be told they were perfectly fine without knowing. Naruto was different, and instead looked her straight in the eyes which, with his piercing blue eyes, unnerved her a little bit. It was like he could pierce straight through her without even trying. What made her a little more on edge was how comfortable she was with the guy. Not even a few minutes with the blonde and she was joking with and teasing him, which she found incredibly fun to do because of how he reacted. Seeing the somewhat cocky blonde turn into a blushing stuttering mess was just hilarious. Sure, she was known for teasing people, but to be this comfortable with someone so fast? It made her a little worried. You didn't see and do the things she had by trusting everyone you met. Yang couldn't help but agree with her other's sentiment. From the short amount of interaction that she had already had with Naruto, she could easily see herself becoming attached. Not only that, but he had been so much fun to tease. He had been harder to bait than most people she knew, but once she knew what cards to play, even he was easy to reduce to a stuttering mess. Before the little get-together could continue, a certain princess in white stomped her way to them and made her presence known by pointing her finger at Ruby whilst yelling, "You!" Ruby reflexively jumped into her sister's arms and cried, "Oh God! She's back!" The girl in white merely continued on her rant. "You're lucky you didn't blow us right off the cliff." "Yeah," Blake began, interrupting her own reading in order to contribute to the banter. "That would have been such a crying shame." The sarcasm in the cat faunus voice was easily apparent, and Weiss could only glare half-heartedly at her friend. She had become closer with Blake after the various escapades that they had gone on. Instead of getting angry and fuming, like she was well known for, the white-themed girl simply slapped Blake lightly on the top of the head, as if chastising a child. "Quite you," the heiress stated, sounding like she was scolding a child. "Get on with reading, your skills at that are far superior than your ability to attempt banter." As she finished, she cocked her head to the side, haughtily. Blake's mouth, and the mouths of several others hanging wide open in shock. Weiss-Schnee had just made a joke, and it had been good. Only once she had snapped out of her stupor was Blake able to continue. Yan looked at her sister, who was still in her arms, in surprise. "Oh God, you really did explode." "I told you it was an accident," Ruby exclaimed in an attempt to defend herself. "To be fair, you were kinda shaking those vials of dust around, so you are also to blame," Naruto butted in. Ruby gave Naruto a grateful smile, while the princess gave him a dirty look he was all too familiar with. Naruto, once again, shot Ruby a thumbs up with his wrapped arm. The girl sent him a slight smile as she felt it safe outside of her hood again. It was always heartwarming to the young girl that she could make such good friends. People that would stand up for her like this were people that she wanted to surround herself with. Even if it was probably not permanent, residing within this world instead of her own, Ruby was glad that she got to meet Naruto. It might not be the same one as in this story, but she could easily tell that they were almost identical in personality. "Hey Kurama, you think she's part Uchiha or something?" "I mean, only an Uchiha can sneer like that." "You got a good point there, Kit. But Uchihas are also known for the love of black, so," Kurama said as he pointed out Weiss' choice in clothing color. Kakashi snickered at the comparison. "A woman out for Sasuke's heart, huh?" He spoke quietly, only getting the attention of Naruto, and both of them chuckled at the comparison. "I don't know," the boy drawled out lazily, similarly to how his sensei spoke on occasion. "I haven't seen her talking about avenging her family, bringing death and ruin onto her brother yet." As Naruto finished, he shifted his voice to a more arrogant tone and crossed his arms. "Now I must perfect my katan techniques as well as my spooky eyes. After that you better watch out." Once again he and Kakashi laughed at the expense of their estranged teammate. It wasn't so much that Naruto disliked Sasuke, no, he loved his brother, but past mistakes were in the past and could, therefore, be made fun of. He could imagine the conversations that he and Sasuke would have about this when they were old men. Sitting around and talking about the good old days, he was sure that Sasuke's past would be a pretty big point of interest when they got to be that old. And just who the heck are you? Taking a page out of one of his teacher's books, Naruto gave the girl a lazy look and drawled out, "I'm sorry, did you say something, princess?" All eyes turned towards Naruto and Kakashi, the later having opened up his orange book and the younger placing his hands atop his and whistling indiscriminately. No one bought the act for a second, but no one truthfully cared. While the girl was turning red from anger, and not so silently fuming, both Yang and Ruby were just looking at the interaction between the two with barely surprised giggles. "I said, who the heck are you?" the girl all but screamed. Naruto just grinned lazily and somehow managed to smile with his eyes. "Isn't it polite to give your name before asking someone else's?" Even though this currently was not happening to the real her, Weiss felt her eyebrows still began to twitch. She understood that when she first came to Beacon that she had a slight attitude problem, but dealing with Naruto would have still made her angry to this day. Deciding to just let it go, she let out a disgruntled sigh. It truthfully was not worth it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Yan was on the floor rolling in laughter while Ruby was not faring much better, hands on her knees as her shoulders shook from laughing. Even those within hearing distance of the group were either laughing or grinning when they saw how well the white-themed girl seemed to be imitating a tomato. Kit, you're evil and I'm so proud. John simply looked over at Naruto. He was kind of miffed that he appeared to not be present so far, but he had to think that Naruto was making a far stronger impression than he upon first arriving to Beacon. The guy hadn't even used a single cheesy pickup line yet. It was honestly kind of saddening. Barely stopping herself from strangling the infuriating blonde in front of her, she seethed out, "My name is Weiss Schnee." Around them some jaws dropped hearing the name Schnee. Evidently Naruto knew the name as well because his own jaw dropped, as in the Schnee Dust Company. The now named Weiss crossed her arms and gained back her arrogance. "That's right, my father is the owner of the largest dust company in all of Vale." Naruto did a complete 180 and went back to his uncaring posture from before. "Wow, then you really should have known better than to be shaking vials of dust like a rattle." This time Kakashi couldn't keep up the facade and almost fell off the couch, he was laughing so hard. So were most of the Beacon students. "Stop laughing!" Weiss snapped, red-faced and feeling mortified. The moment was lost on the rest in attendance, as they simply sat back, watching in awkward silence. Almost instantly the laughter came back even stronger than before as Yang gasped in an attempt to get some much-needed air into her lungs, Ruby equally out of breath. Weiss on the other hand let loose a scream of frustration and threw her arms in the air. "Ugh! You are so infuriating!" As Weiss stamped away in anger, Naruto just chuckled as Yang leaned on him, still trying to regain her breath. "Foxy, I think this is the start of a beautiful friendship." As the crowd began to quiet down, a man dressed in an all-green suit with silver hair and glasses walked his way before the microphone, aided by a metallic walking cane of some sort. This was the head of Beacon Academy, Ozpin. The screen lit up for the benefit of Naruto and Kakashi. The man on the screen looked similar to Kakashi, but his hair was down, and he seemed to have an affinity for the color green. "Not a bad looker," the white-haired man stated rather lazily. "I will keep this brief. You have traveled here today in search of knowledge, to hone your craft and acquire new skills. And when you are finished you plan to dedicate your life to the protection of the people, but I look amongst you and all I see is wasted energy, in need of purpose, direction. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time at this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. It is up to you to take the first step." Once again Kakashi frowned. This was mediocre at best. If this man truly wished to inspire his students, he needed to put them to the test, put them in a situation that could kill them. They would need to understand the importance of a life, the importance of what it costs when a life is taken away. Without a word more, Ozpin began to walk away, not even sparing a glance at the crowd of his newest students. Equal amounts of shock, anger, and denial ran through the teens in the crowd after Ozpin's rather bleak speech. Yan huffed in anger at the man's words, while Ruby looked down in contemplation. Naruto merely stood there with his arms crossed. "Great, another Kakashi. Wonder if he has some porn stashed away like the scarecrow too," Naruto thought to himself. At that, most of the females turned towards Kakashi in order to glare at him. "Is that what you're reading?" Weiss began rather angrily. "Some garbage smut novels? Are you that much of a pervert?" "He is. Trust me, you're talking to a guy who reads porn in front of children in public before sticking his fingers up there, but after that, it hurt to use the bathroom for 3 days. It was horrible." Naruto shuddered. At that, most of the women all unleashed Bijou-level murderous intent focused solely on the man as they continued to glare at him, the man beginning to break out in a light sweat similar to when Kurenai used to do the same. He honestly didn't think that he would be on the receiving end of a glare this strong again in his life. Kakashi was just glad they didn't have any weapons on hand at the moment. A blonde-haired woman wearing glasses and a cape of some sort strode up the microphone to take Ozpin's place. "You will gather in the ballroom tonight. Tomorrow your initiation begins. Be ready. You are dismissed." Sitting atop the windowsill with one leg dangling outside, Naruto allowed the crisp night air to brush against his face, his blonde locks rustling in the wind, while his cerulean orb stared at the moon that now hung in the starry night sky. Going over today's events, he had to chuckle at the parallels in this new life of his. Without even opening one of his eyes, Kurama spoke through their mental connection. "Parallels there may be, but remember, Kit, there will also be many differences. You cannot allow your past to haunt you any longer, lest you become like that one-eyed sensei of yours." This was all new to everyone present. Naruto's eyes narrowed in thought. This world was different from his own, yet he seemed to obtain all memories of his past life, at least until a certain point. He still had his arm, so he doubted that he had confronted Sasuke. Truth be told, he wasn't even sure if he had participated in the Fourth Shinobi War in this timeline. Apparently, during his time in the life of his alternate self in the story, something had changed, and he had ended up in the very different world of Remnant. He had traveled dimensions during his battle with Kagaya, and it wouldn't be that surprising if he had been stuck in one, away from his friends, stranded in a different world. The thought made him shudder. It was not something that he would desire to live. If his past was going to haunt him in this life as Kurama said, then it was obvious that he must have made some mistake. A mistake that had cost him dearly. Naruto only offered a bittersweet smile as he absent-mindedly allowed his fingers to softly stroke Kurama's fur. Looking back now, it was funny how much things had changed. Almost a year or so ago, and the fox that was curled up in his lap had wanted nothing more than to tear him to bloody bits, and break out of the seal that kept him in Naruto. Now? Well, Naruto had no idea how he would have survived this long without Kurama's help. Then there was Naruto himself. Looking back, he could have slapped himself. Admittedly, he really hadn't changed all that much. He was still pretty hyper and knucklehead, but the difference now was that he had balanced out. Thanks to Kurama's help and his own determination, he had been able to improve in almost every area by leaps and bounds. Naruto couldn't help but snort. He considered himself to be rather humble, but he was still proud when it came to his abilities in a fight. He had brought an end to war during his time, and he had defeated a goddess. No matter how strong training with Kurama had made him, he doubted it would be as impressive as he and Sasuke teaming up against Madara and then Kagaya. Naruto was knocked out of his little reverie when he felt the presence of Ruby next to him. Penny for your thoughts. The blonde turned and took in Ruby's pajamas with a smile. While in her normal clothes, the girl looked ready to go into battle, or a Halloween party. However, in her pink pajama bottoms and black tank top, Ruby actually looked her age. Ruby also took in Naruto's own sleepwear with a minor blush. The white tank top with some sort of leaf-like symbol that hung off his form allowed his well-muscled arms to be seen quite easily. Likewise, the navy blue gym shorts with that red swirl of his did a good job of showing off his equally well-toned legs. Ruby had to blush as, with the moon in the background and blonde hair swaying gently in the breeze, Naruto looked quite attractive. Once again, Ruby was gone. All people present had seen her face to darken past the shade of red that her hair currently was and then jump inside of her cloak once more. She fell out of her chair, landing on the ground and rolling herself up as if she was in a blanket. She did not think of boys that way. She just wanted to hide until all of this blew over. Yang simply bit her lip as she felt a smile tug at her lips. She could tease Ruby over this, but the girl was already distraught enough. Instead, she turned her attention to her fellow blonde on the couch. Who would have guessed that you would have been able to give my sister such naughty thoughts? The girl began, placing her hand to her lips as if she was scandalized. I can't wait to see you in clothing similar. A light dust painted Naruto's cheeks, but he refused to fall victim to this once again. Holding his ground, he quirked an eyebrow at Yang before giving out a short taunt. Is that all you've got? I've received worse from my grandmother, and she's ancient. Kakashi's eyes widened at that declaration. If Tsunade ever caught word of Naruto saying that, he was sure that she would put him through a mountain or two and that would just be her warm-up. He put the pen in his hand down. Not even he would condemn his student to a fate such as that. Yang Xiaolong lightly glared at Naruto. She would have the last laugh. She swore it upon her title of greatest teaser at Beacon Academy. Just thinking about home. Where are you from? Ruby asked curiously. She admittedly didn't know much about her new blonde friend, which was something she wanted to remedy. Naruto just turned his gaze back to the moon. He had spent enough time here on Remnant to have come up with a backstory which was as close to the truth as he could get without having to tell everyone the complete truth. It was a village out in the middle of nowhere. It was my people's attempt at starting up another city like Vale. It had actually been around for a while, and thanks to the forests that surrounded it, it was named Konohagakure no Sato. Blake frowned as she read that. She had never expected the boisterous blonde over there to have any sort of tragic backstory. True, it always made a book better to read about a reluctant hero in her mind, but it was different this time. After all, the tragic hero that this book was written about was not even 10 feet away from her, sitting on the couch and having to listen to this. She was sure that things had turned out differently for him in actuality instead of fiction. After all, he wasn't on Remnant now, but it still didn't make it much different for her. The way that Naruto held himself truly did show experience beyond his years. She could only assume the boy was 17 or 18 at the moment, and it was obvious from the way that the held himself that he had experience that few did. He looked similar to the really old war veterans in the white fawn that she had grown up around. Faunas that had experienced the Great War on the front lines and lived to tell about it. Before Ruby could question exactly what the name meant and what language it was in, a slightly surprised yet subdued voice made its way into their conversation. The village hidden in the leaves. Both Naruto and Ruby turned their eyes to see the black-haired girl who had helped out Ruby earlier in the day making her way to them, book in hand. Naruto raised his brow and nodded, surprised that someone actually knew the language. Yeah, that's spot on actually. I'm surprised someone even knows that language still. The raven-haired teen offered her brow raise. Same can be said for you. For all intents and purposes it's a dead language. It was then that Naruto turned towards Blake. You speak Japanese? The girl simply shook her head in response. She didn't. A skill that must have been privy to the version of her in only this book. Naruto just smiled. My village actually preferred it. Made names and stuff sound a lot cooler. By the way, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Blake. And your name? Your parents really liked ramen, huh? Naruto childishly pouted. Damn it, that's not what my name means. Ruby giggled at Naruto's pout before asking. So what does it really mean then? The blonde just puffed out his chest and proudly declared, Maelstrom. Blake chose to interject. So your full name means Maelstrom Spiral then? To think you were named after a protagonist in one of Jiraiya-sama's novels, and you cannot even appreciate his literature. Naruto turned towards his sensei, a neutral mask on his face. It was almost as if his look was begging the question of, are you kidding me? You're just mad that pervy sage only wrote one decent novel in his life. You can continue to believe that the trash you read is good, but it still doesn't have a movie of it, and you will never star in it if it does. The man's eyebrows twitched erratically. If his student was still weaker than him, he would definitely give him the what for. Instead, a smirk came to his face. Perhaps when they returned and he became Hokage, he could find a suitable punishment. Kakashi's hands rubbed together ominously as he thought about the D-rank missions that he could assign to his young protege. Naruto just grinned cockily. You got it! Yang suddenly appeared behind Naruto, scaring him enough to almost make him lose his balance and fall out the window. Thankfully, she had also chosen to grab his whiskered cheeks and began tugging at them. I don't know, I think I'll just stick with calling you Foxy. With Yang still painfully tugging at his cheeks, Naruto began to cry dramatically. Ruby, help! Get your crazy sister off me! There's no helping him. Ruby's voice came from under her cloak, the girl still hiding for the time being. She feared for her friend, but at the moment, she feared for herself even more. If she got involved with this battle, then she would only be collateral damage. Who you calling crazy, mister? Yang yelled as she began to tug at Naruto's cheeks even harder, laughing maniacally all the while. Why is the Mr. part in its abbreviation form? Blake wondered. Lazy author? Weiss guessed. Ruby began to laugh as she watched her sister torture their new friend, while even the normally cool Blake cracked a grin as she watched the two blondes interact. Say it. Say uncle. You can't make me. You wanna bet Foxy? Ow 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 ow. Damn it, Young, that hurts. Say it. Never. Shut the hell up. Some of us are trying to sleep. Silence. It appears that the creature from the White Lagoon will be making her second appearance. Weiss shot a glare at Blake as she cracked a smile, and Yang giggled at the dark-haired girl's joke. You laugh now, but just you wait, Blake. Vengeance will be mine. Even though the line had been spoken in jest, both Kakashi and Naruto's eyes widened dramatically. The boy rose a shaky finger, remembering his earlier conversation with his sensei, as it slowly pointed at Weiss. You wouldn't happen to know any fire-based techniques, would you? The girl only quirked an eyebrow at the question as she nodded. I specialize in all types of dust. Fire is something that I use on occasion. Both men broke into fits of laughter as Naruto struggled for air. Close enough, was all he was able to get out between gasps for air. None knew what was going on, but all let the oddity slide. Ruby stared at the poor bastard who had told both Naruto and Yang to shut up with wide eyes. This was not gonna end well for the guy, at least. Quietly she wondered what kind of flowers he liked. Both Naruto and Yang slowly turned their heads to face the brave, foolish soul who would dare interrupt them. For a moment both parties stared directly at each other, the nameless and random teen defiantly glaring straight back at the pair of blondes. However, when Yang slowly stepped off of Naruto's back and cracked her knuckles, he began to sweat. When Naruto began to crack his neck, the glare dropped off his face. With fearful eyes he watched as the blonde duo stalked their way over to his place on the floor, people quickly clearing the way so as not to get in between the cold fury of Naruto and Yang and their prey. That night screams of pain echoed throughout the school grounds for 10 minutes straight before all was quiet. Weiss sent a triumphant smirk towards the B in Team RWBY as the section of the chapter finished. It appears that it wasn't myself after all, just some poor soul who was not me. A hum escaped the faunus lips as she thought over the quandary. It appeared that subtle differences such as this one would be present in the story. In the original timeline, it had been Weiss who had interrupted the conversation between Ruby, Yang, and herself. Perhaps this was destiny's way of letting Weiss live. If Weiss had engaged against Naruto and Yang, well, the dark-haired girl could only shiver at the thought. Regardless of their rather awkward past fights, Blake rather liked Weiss. It would be kind of hard to enjoy the company of a girl if she was not whole. Now that was a good night's sleep, Yang declared as she stretched, drawing the eyes of every teen male in the room. Naruto grinned as he stretched as well, couldn't agree more. Yang slept like a log. Ruby could only sweat drop upon seeing the devious grin the two shared. Maybe introducing them to each other was a bad idea. Naruto couldn't help but shrug at the thought. He was sure that he and Yang would have gotten in plenty of trouble together if they had attended the academy, or, God forbid, been on the same team. It was a fair judgment call from the girl, but he knew what was coming next as soon as he witnessed the proverbial gleam in Yang's eye. Is sister embarrassed by little ol' me? Yang was attempting to provoke something, but all that the group was able to see was a slight shifting in the cloak. The smirk was still on her sister's face and Ruby knew it. Naruto collected his stuff before walking out of the hall, Yang, Ruby, and surprisingly Blake not too far behind. As the group made their way to the locker rooms where their battle clothes and weapons were, Naruto decided to spark up a conversation, not one for silences. So you guys ready for whatever our initiation is today? Ruby was bouncing around like a rabbit out of excitement in response. Oh my gosh. Today's the day. We're gonna become hunters and huntresses. This is so exciting. Naruto chuckled at the girl's exuberance while Yang shook her head at her sister's hyperactiveness. You bet but we are Foxy. Winking at her fellow blonde, she continued, "Just don't get left behind, okay?" Naruto laughed as petted a still sleeping Kurama. "PSH. Speak for yourself. I got this test in the bag, Tobeo." Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at the taunt that Yang had given, even if it had not been towards him. He was not exactly sure how strong people from Remnant were, but he had a hard time believing that any of them could come close to where he was at the moment. If he had been able to manifest Kurama in that life, he was sure that he was plenty powerful there as well. As far as he was concerned, Yang had it backwards. She should be making sure that she could keep up with him. Blake raised an eyebrow at the verbal tick before turning curious eyes at the fox kit wrapped around Naruto's neck. She had seen the fox before, but seeing as it had spent most of the time sleeping, she had passed it off as nothing of importance. Now, however, with them no doubt heading into combat, she raised the question, "Naruto, what about your pet? Is it a good idea to bring it along?" The fox seemed to have heard her and in response opened its eyes before glaring at her and growling. While Kurama usually appeared to be sleeping, he was always keeping his senses out, making sure to keep him and Naruto aware of anything and everything around them. As such, he had heard Blake's question and was none too happy at being called a pet. "She better watch it. I am no pet. I am the great Kyubi no Kitsune, nine-tailed fox. Strongest of the bijou-tailed beasts, and I could easily crush her underneath my paw. How big is the fox supposed to be?" The question came from Rin as he leaned forward, opening his eyes in the process. It was a fair question. The creature described so far was no larger than an average fox, and only possessed one tail. Its size was an adjustable factor in his mind. Naruto shrugged his shoulders as he thought about it. Probably about the size of a small mountain. He was kinda smaller than that for a while, but now he is a little bit larger than the Hokage monument back home. Rin simply blinked a couple of times before nodding his head and leaning back in his chair. He didn't have the energy to think too much about this. Blake was mildly surprised to see twin crimson orbs bore into her own amber eyes, clearly expressing just how angry the fox was. The blue-eyed teen turned to face Blake. "I'd apologize. Kurama here doesn't like to be called a pet." Blake raised an eyebrow, wondering just what kind of fox this Kurama was. She had never seen a fox or any animal with such unique red eyes, or even fur of that color. The fox also seemed to be extremely intelligent, having perfectly understood what she had said. Sorry Kurama? Damn right she is. I have killed far stronger and more intelligent life forms for far less than that." Naruto simply rolled his eyes at Kurama's idle threats. He and the fox both knew that Kurama was far too lazy to put in the effort to kill anything nowadays. He was just being prideful like always. The small fox looked to have actually scoffed, further surprising Blake and the others, before resuming his position as Naruto's scarf. "Stupid cats. Think they're so amazing," Kurama huffed. Naruto's sweat dropped at his friend's comment. "Well, that's probably as good as you're gonna get. He's pretty stubborn when he wants to be." Blake decided to voice her question as she kept looking at Kurama in curiosity. "What kind of fox is he?" "He's pretty smart, and doesn't look like any fox I've seen." Naruto shrugged. He was sort of an experiment my village was doing. They wanted to see how aura affected animals, and so as a small kid he was injected with doses of mine, which is why we're so close. That's also why I know he can take care of himself. He has his own semblance. Aura? Semblance? The two words were spoken separately, questions in the mind of both student and sensei. It was Pira who took up the role of instructor this time. "Our aura is a power that manifests from our souls. It is attributed to a physical shield that blocks us from harm and also helps us heal. The bodies of humans and faunas that have their aura awakened are naturally stronger than average people. Our semblances are abilities that manifest from our aura. A unique ability that everyone with aura possesses. It is typically unique between people and manifests from the individual's personality. For example, when you saw Ruby move so quickly, disappearing in a flurry of rose petals, you saw her semblance. That ability is entirely unique to her." Naruto simply hummed as Pira finished her explanation, offering the girl a small smile in return. "Thanks." The one word conveyed a great message between the two of them as Pira instantly returned his smile. "If you don't use aura, then what do you use?" Pira had been slightly nervous about asking, figuring that it might be considered personal, but the boy only shrugged his shoulders and held out his hand, a blue ball of spiraling energy quickly forming in it. "It's called chakra, and I'm sure that we will get to see it in action throughout the story." Kurama mentally grinned. My kid, that was a pretty good lie. "Seems like you really are becoming a true shinobi." Naruto just shrugged. Just because he kind of trusted Ruby, Yang, and Blake didn't mean he was gonna just spill his whole life story to them. He had been stabbed far too many times in the back to be that trusting anymore. Besides, it wasn't like they'd believe him if he told them that Kurama was actually just a physical manifestation of energy that had been sealed inside of him by his parents and death when he was only a few minutes old. Or that Kurama was actually several stories tall, and so powerful that with just a flick of his tail he could crumble mountains. Blake found herself pausing as she read. From what she had been able to gather, from the conversations in the story and the ones between her and the shinobi on the couch, the place that they came from wasn't exactly friendly. She couldn't help but wonder if Naruto had been subjugated to treatment similar to the faunas for some reason or another. With the way that he had described the way he had been backstabbed on several occasions, the idea certainly had merit. She wouldn't bring it up, but she had already begun to think that the two of them might have more in common than she thought. After all, having a beast as terrifying as Kurama sealed inside him by death itself could easily lead to the thought process that Konohagakure no Sato might not be such a hospitable place. Yeah, he'd be locked up in the loony boon faster than his father's Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique. Both Yang and Ruby shrugged at Naruto's explanation. Their family had a dog who also acted as a partner on some missions, so Naruto having a fox who could do the same wasn't that weird to them. As the group of 4+1 fox finally reached the locker room, they separated to head to their lockers and get changed. Naruto had the foresight to get dressed away from the girls, knowing what happened to guys who tried to peek on women who knew how to fight and had sharp pointy things on hand. And that, Kakashi, is why I never listened to any advice that Jiraiya gave me regarding anything other than training. The man only nodded his head sagely in response. He might have been a disciple of Jiraiya, but not even he was foolish enough to take up the practices of the man he revered so highly. Finally dressed in his clothing and making sure that his pouches were full of kunai and that he had his main weapon sealed into the scroll attached to his belt, Naruto began to make his way out of the locker rooms. On the way out he managed to catch the tail end of Weiss asking someone to be her partner for the exam. Wondering who was apparently so good that the princess was asking them to be her partner, Naruto peeked over and was shocked. Standing there with a small smile on her beautifully unmarried face was a girl so beautiful he was sure his jaw had just hit the ground. Noticing the dumb look on his container's face, Kurama turned to look at the girl only to have his eyes bug out. Kit, I know I'm always teasing you, but damn, now I see why your dad liked redheads so much. And Kurama wasn't wrong. With hair as red as blood tied into a ponytail and garbed in bronze-looking armor and a battle skirt with boots, the girl looked as dangerous as she was beautiful. Naruto was able to catch what Weiss said about the girl. Apparently she was so good that she was the undefeated champ of some tournament for 3 years and had even earned the moniker of the Invincible Girl. Pyrrha had known where this was going before it had even said her name. She may have been slightly prepared, but that didn't stop her face from glowing brightly. She desired to take a page out of Ruby's book and hide somewhere, but she knew that she couldn't. In similarity to Pyrrha's face, Naruto's was rather red as well. He began to massage his temples as he looked at the ground, not being able to meet his sensei's face at the moment. He was not sure he desired to see what was there. It's always the redheads, Naruto lamented to himself. Unfortunately for him, Naruto knew very well just how he was around such women. Confident, strong, yet gentle and understanding. And the red hair? Yeah, he'd be lucky if he could throw a kunai straight with her around. He really had inherited his father's love of redheads. It appears that my student has become quite the ladies' man. If Jiraiya had been present, he would have been proud to see how well Kakashi could move his eyebrows. Naruto didn't raise his head and Pyrrha did not either. Both were just ready for this part of the book to be over as fast as possible, hoping that Kami was on his side and that he wouldn't have to be around her for too long for the sake of his dignity. Naruto made his way out to join Ruby and Yang. Had he looked back once more, he would have seen the redhead ignore Weiss in favor of turning to look at his retreating form. It's that blonde guy. His name was Naruto, I think. He's a little odd. Smiling to herself, she recalled his entrance at the freshman's speech, and funny too. Naruto moaned in embarrassment at that as his and Pharah's blushes worsened. As Blake once more brought up the line break, John Ark felt completely devastated. Where the heck am I? This is the third scene I was supposed to be in, and I couldn't even be there to give Weiss the pickup line that began to win her heart. Naruto picked his head up as he eyed the white-themed girl curiously. Instead of agreeing, her face turned red, not in embarrassment but in anger. Don't spread such lies, John. Don't let these people think anything of the sort. As she finished, Naruto stood and walked towards the other couch, sitting a couple of spaces away from Rin and Nora. He subtly noticed Pyrrha scoot towards the middle, and he also saw the small smile forming on her face. Regardless, he did not want the girl to feel any more awkward than she already did. The current gathering of students consisting of a grinning Naruto, a hyperactive Ruby, a cocky Yang, calm Blake, haughty Weiss, an odd girl with short orange hair bugging a teen with long raven black hair, a serene redhead, and both Ozpin and his assistant Glinda stood at the edge of cliff, below which stretched miles upon miles of wild untamed forest. Taking note that everyone who needed to be there was there, Ozpin began after taking a sip from his coffee cup. For years you have trained to be warriors, and today your abilities will be evaluated in the Emerald Forest. It's official, Yang said as if she was stating fact. Vomit Boy isn't at Beacon. All eyes turned towards John as he hung his head, having already come to the same conclusion. He would not be relevant in this story, and it appeared that Naruto might be taking his place. Glinda decided to step in and with some sort of tablet in hand continued for Ozpin. Now I'm sure many of you have heard rumors about the assignment of teams. Well, allow us to put an end to your confusion. Each of you will be given teammates today. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the mention of teammates. Geez, can this get any more like Konoha? Kakashi only scoffed at the declaration. He had put his student through hell and he was proud of that fact. The initial testing that he had put Team 7 through was harder than what any other sensei did, and he was certain that it had saved all of their lives during the wave mission. He had administered it for a reason, implying that this test was going to be anything nearly as bad as what he did was almost insulting. Anything worse could be considered borderline torture. Though he did have to wonder why Ruby looked so down while Yang was giving her an I told you so look. These teammates will be with you for the rest of your time here at Beacon, so it is in your best interest to be paired with someone with whom you can work well, Ozpin lectured. Ruby turned to give Naruto a hopeful look, silently asking him if he would be her partner. Naruto guessed that Yang was attempting to get her little sister to meet new people, but he could see that Ruby would be more than comfortable only having a small handful of people she could trust, a sentiment he shared with her. As such he just gave her a smile and shrugged, silently agreeing with her. Once more Ruby emerged from her cloak to give the boy a bright smile. She was so glad that in that life, and even in this one to some extent, she had been able to meet such a kind and caring individual. More and more throughout this story she was beginning to learn about Naruto, and she was rather glad. Her friends at Beacon had been rather close-knit, and to not be able to meet an individual as caring as Naruto kinda sucked. Sure, she had John and she cared deeply for her friend, but Naruto was a unique individual all on his own. She truly felt cheated that she did not get to experience Beacon Academy with such a great person. As if to shatter any of Ruby's hopes at being paired with someone she knew, Ozpin continued with a small amount of pleasure in his voice. That being said, the first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years. Naruto had to withhold a laugh as he saw Ruby's world begin crumbling down around her. Off to the side the girl with orange hair happily turned to her friend. See? I told you. Not wanting to be interrupted any further, Ozpin continued his little speech. After you've partnered up, head to the north end of the forest. You will meet opposition along the way. Do not hesitate to destroy everything in your path, or you will die. Kakashi hummed in appreciation of this tactic. Perhaps Ozpin wasn't as easygoing as he had initially thought. Regardless, he would still have to fault this principle of teaching. These children were going to become protectors of the world, and he was sure that Grim was not the only things that they would be running up against. They should have been pitted against one another or given a human opponent to face in conjunction to the Grim in order to give them more realistic world experience. At least this was a good start. At hearing that, a sudden grim look came across everyone's face. Our favorite blonde protagonist meanwhile had to resist the urge to sweat drop. Okay, this is getting freaky now. I mean, really? Another silver-haired teacher preaching the need to walk into a test with the intent to kill. Ma, don't complain, Naruto, Kakashi began as his eyes crinkled up, signifying his usual smile. I gave you a test worse than this one when you were 12. This should be a piece of cake for you. Naruto only glared at his sensei. He wanted to bring up the fact that he still felt phantom pains in his rump from when he had practically been violated the pervert, but he cared far too much for his own image to do so. Regardless, he still owed Kakashi for that one. You will be monitored and graded for the duration of your initiation, but our instructors will not intervene. Taking a sip of coffee, Ozpin paused in his speech, allowing the weight of his words to really sink in. After a few seconds he continued, you will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path containing several relics. Each pair must choose one and return to the top of the cliff. You will guard that item as well as your standing and be graded appropriately. Any questions? The group nodded in the negative, everyone already clear on their instructions, simple as they were. Find a partner, get through the forest, grab a relic, and make it back to cliff, hopefully in one piece. Ozpin nodded, seemingly satisfied with the determination each of his prospective students was showing in the face of the obstacle before them. Good. Now take your positions. Already having seen the silver launch pads beneath their feet, each student prepared themselves. The first to be launched into the air was the Shini heiress, who merely allowed herself to fly through the air with a bland look. Naruto only let out a whistle. That sounded like it could be pretty fun. From the various nostalgic faces in the group he could tell that this had been a good time. Why wouldn't it have been? This is where their teams were chosen, they were bound to be fond of it in some way or another, at least, excluding John. He just appeared to be getting visibly ill at the memory of the interesting launch devices. One by one each of the students was sent rocketing into the air by the pads beneath them. Soon only Yang, Ruby, and Naruto remained. Before Yang was launched into the air she winked at Naruto before pulling out a pair of sunglasses from somewhere, and with a whoop of joy she too was sent flying. The action was mimicked in the room they were residing in. From seemingly nowhere Yang pulled out some shades and put them on before striking a pose. Forgot I had these. Naruto laughed boisterously while Blake cupped her face in her hands. It seemed Ruby was equally affected by her sister, as she made some sort of strange whining noise as she sat on the ground. Ruby turned and offered a smirk at Naruto before she joined her sister and the others in the air. As the last one left to be launched, Naruto looked at both Ozpin and Glinda before offering them a cocky smirk as he rotated his neck, cracking it in the process. He bowed to the two and was launched off into the sky like a bullet. Yahoo! Ozpin turned and regarded his longtime friend and associate with a raised brow. He was an odd one. Glinda frowned, clearly unhappy with how nonchalant Naruto had seemed, almost like life or death situations were nothing new to him. The other students had looked just as excited to prove themselves, but it was clear they were also weary of the danger that called the forest home. The blonde did not. He had a look in his eye that she had only seen in veteran hunters and huntresses, the look of someone who had spilled blood and fought in battles their life on the line far too many times. It did not sit well with the strict woman and set her on edge. Naruto could only shrug. It was a look similar to what most people had in the elemental nations, and he really didn't see it as a big deal. Eyes were, after all, the proverbial window to the soul. You could always tell the life that a person lived by how they carried themselves, but you could tell the battles they fought from the look in their eyes. He caught Blake eyeing him curiously and sent the girl a small smile. She returned to the book, her cheeks slightly pink at the embarrassment of being caught staring. Wondering just who the blonde was, she instantly pulled up the video feed of him on her tablet, and pulled up his record next to it. Naruto laughed to himself as he saw several of the others already begin to descend back towards terra firma. However, Naruto wasn't an adept user of futon, wind release, for nothing. Calling forth only a small portion of his massive chakra reserves, he allowed it to coat his form, creating a streamlined shield of wispy light green chakra. Now far more aerodynamic, he pushed only a smaller portion into his feet, propelling him further and faster than the others. You can manipulate the elements with your chakra? The question came from Weiss as she turned towards Kakashi, who only shrugged in response. Sure, the silver-haired man replied. I'm pretty good with lightning and Naruto is a wind type. It is considered to be one of the harder practices to master with chakra, but it is a staple in most high-level shinobi where we come from. The girl only nodded, satisfied with the answer. Soon he was naught but a screaming blonde bullet tearing through the air like a knife through wet paper. As he passed the others who had been launched before him, he could hear the gasps of shock and one girl in red as she attempted to copy him by using the recoil from her weapon, only to slice through a bird in the process. Birdie no! Naruto nearly died of laughter as Ruby blushed at that memory. She had forgotten about the poor bird that she had hit on entry to the Emerald Forest. Soon the others began to follow suit, using either their weapons or their semblance to propel themselves even further into the Emerald Forest. However, humans were not meant to fly, and eventually gravity began to show itself, bringing them all back down to the earth. Seeing that he was slowly making his way into the trees and wanting to avoid any injuries or broken limbs, he reached into the pouch on his thigh and pulled out 2 kunai knives. Holding the ninja knives in a reverse grip, he allowed his bubble of wind-natured chakra to pop, letting the winds slam into him, greatly slowing him down. With his speed slowed down, the blonde was able to weave through several of the trees, each time he did so bringing down his speed even more. Eventually Naruto had slowed to a decent enough speed to be able to stab his kunai into a large tree trunk. Curving his legs inwards, he swung his body around the tree, carving out a spiral into the trunk as he made his way to the forest floor. When he was close enough to the ground that he wouldn't break a bone from a fall, he let go of the blades and performed a flip whilst tucking into a ball. As Naruto came even closer to the ground, he unfurled himself and like a gymnast landed perfectly on his feet before bowing to the imaginary crowd. I'll give it a 9 out of 10, Kurama snickered. Naruto blew a raspberry at his fox friend, insulted that he didn't get a perfect score. Truth be told, it sounds like you just ripped me off. The comment came from Rin as he had, once more, sat up and opened his eyes. He looked at the blonde, who simply rolled his neck and shrugged. I would have gone with something flashier anyway. Have to appeal to the imaginary audience database. As the blonde flashed Rin a grin, the green-clad teenager couldn't help but let out a short chuckle. It was a similar technique he had used to dismount, but that really didn't matter. He just found it rather funny that his own landing would not have gotten a perfect score from a mountain-sized fox with 9 tails. The sound of the bushes rustling put him on high alert. Thinking that he was already going to be attacked by something that wanted him as dinner, he pulled out another kunai knife and with perfect aim tossed it into the bush with the precision and speed that came with his years of experience using the knives. He was surprised though when, instead of the squelching sound of metal piercing flesh, he heard the metallic ring of steel meeting steel. As the victim of Naruto's paranoid attack emerged from the brush, all he could do was face palm while Kurama was near gasping from laughter. Ha ha! Kami really loves to see you squirm, kid. Out from the brush emerged a smiling red-haired beauty, round bronze shield and spear in hand. Fuck me. As the words left Naruto's mouth, he hung his head, a storm cloud forming over it in an over-dramatized way. Pyrrha wasn't faring much better as she placed her head into her hands. The girl had sort of come to expect this when John had not made an appearance. To be partnered up with Naruto didn't seem so bad, but she could already hear the comments from Yang. The boy always did have the devil's own luck, Kakashi said as he attempted to fight off his giggles. Yang busted out in laughter similar to his own as they both continued rioting over the expense of one Naruto Uzumaki. Looking skyward, Naruto began to curse out Kami, convinced she had either abandoned him or just enjoyed torturing him. Resigned to his fate, he offered a smile in hand. Naruto Uzumaki. The redhead returned the smile before attaching her shield to her back and shaking Naruto's offered hand. Pyrrha Nikos. Naruto nervously laughed as he rubbed the back of his head, an old nervous habit of his. Guess that makes us partners, huh? By the way, sorry for almost stabbing you with one of my kunai. I'm sure you would have liked to stab Pyrrha with something else as well. Yam was back in full force as either Pyrrha or Naruto had any sort of rebuttal to the current onslaught of teasing. Ruby's face turned red in a way that put her color scheme to shame, but that wasn't the only response she got. Yang, don't you have any shame? The blonde girl turned towards her blue-eyed teammate and offered the girl a cheeky grin. If I did, I wouldn't be so awesome. She had desire to see what Weiss would say, but Blake cut off the desired reaction. Is that what we are calling it now? I didn't think awesome was synonymous with annoying all my books, and I don't have a thesaurus. Such a shame. As the words left Blake's mouth, Yang immediately deflated and Naruto began to laugh heartily. He sent Blake a thumbs up and a motion conveying he wished her to continue. He didn't want Yang to recover prematurely after all. Pira simply offered a kind smile and laughed. We are indeed, and no harm done. She looked at Naruto, who seemed to be unarmed. Outside of the aforementioned kunai, do you not have your own weapon? Naruto grabbed the scroll that hung from his belt and twirled it on a finger. I do, but I usually don't use it unless I need to. I can usually handle most opponents just using my semblance and kunai. As he stumbled on his words in the middle of the sentence, he began to mentally curse himself. Always the damn redheads. At least you aren't as bad as your father. Before your father and mother were married, that man would fall to peace around Kushina with the exception of missions. It was actually quite comical. Naruto spared Kakashi a glance. Kakashi had been, 6 or 7 when his parents started dating. Had it really been that obvious? If so, how had nobody been able to figure out whose son he was? Some of the people his parents had known must have truly been oblivious. Luckily Pira didn't show any signs of her being suspicious or even having caught him falling over his words, and nodded her head. So what is your semblance then? Naruto just winked at the redhead, some of his usual bravado making its way back to him. That my partner is a secret. Though hopefully I won't have to use it anytime soon. As he said that, the sounds of twigs snapping caught both teens' attention, and again Naruto began to curse Kami all over again. Lumbering out of the trees was, unfortunately, not another of the people taking the initiation, but was instead the massive form of bear-like beast. Instead of the usual brown fur though, this monster was covered in pitch black fur with a bone-white mask covering its face, while various pieces of what looked to be bone protruded out from random areas on its towering form. This was a creature of Grimm, an Ursa. Judging by its near 8-foot stature and plated form, this was an older and more experienced Ursai, an Ursa Major to be exact. As Naruto drew a pair of kunai and Pira pulled her shield off her back, Naruto could only mutter a single sentence. Well, fuck you too then, Kami. As the line finished, Blake looked up from the book and offered a small smile to the people present in the room. That is the end of the first chapter. Who would like to read next? Chapter 2. Here, I'll read it. Kakashi said, taking the book. Naruto let out a fake gasp. Kakashi can read something other than smut? He said in a sarcastic, half-shock, half-horrified tone, a large smirk on his face. Kakashi gave Naruto a glare. Naruto was so doing D-ranks as long as the Scarecrow was going to be Hokage. The creatures of Grimm, monstrous and beastly creatures whose sole reason for existence was to bring death to mankind. They did not hunger for meat, vegetation, or any other normal food source. In fact, when observed, it seemed like they did not need to eat or drink to survive like any other living creature on Remnant. However, this did not mean that they lacked a desire to eat. The one thing these creatures seemed to crave, to hunger for, was human flesh and blood. Not liking that, Naruto muttered. And not just from the descriptions of what these grim things were like. They reminded him a bit of that black Zetsu creep with the way they looked according to the images on the screen. How do you think we feel having to deal with those things? John asked. No one on Remnant had any 100% proven idea as to what Grimm were or even how they came to exist. Scientists were not able to properly observe Grimm due to how hard it was to keep even a young one in captivity. What made it even more difficult to study the Grimm was that, upon death, their bodies would fade from existence, leaving not even a hair to be examined. Kakashi frowned at that, eyes narrowing. The only concrete facts the people of Remnant knew regarding Grimm were thus. Grimm were drawn to dark emotions such as jealousy, hatred, and greed. The monsters had a fondness for human flesh, and they were capable of learning from experience. Naruto could add something else to that list though. The group from Remnant all looked surprised at that. It was Naruto's first encounter with Grimm, far as they could tell. What had he been able to learn at a glance like that when people that had studied Grimm all their lives couldn't figure out anything else? His godfather and mentor, Jiraiya, had been a powerful man, known across the elemental countries for his prowess in the art of ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, sealing arts. Jiraiya and his 2 teammates had earned themselves fame and infamy in their youth, becoming known as the Densetsu no Sannin, legendary 3 ninja. Impressive stuff. Ren nodded. Out of the various skills Jiraiya had passed down to his godson, chief among them was the skill that had earned the now-deceased Shinobi the title of Gamma Sannin, Toad Sage. The skill was legendary even among Naruto's people and was known as Senjutsu, Sage Technique. The technique allowed the user to gather the very energy of nature herself and blend it into their body, bolstering both their physical and mental prowess to otherwise unachievable heights. You can do that? John asked, awed by that. Naruto nodded. Yeah, training in it wasn't easy though. As such, the practitioners of Senjutsu were seen as sages, and even when they were not actively using nature chakra, even novice sages were keenly aware of it, and those who could use it. As such, Naruto was thoroughly shocked when he noticed that the creatures of Grimm were comprised almost entirely of nature chakra. Okay, I'm really not liking that, at all. Naruto said, eyes huge. What does that mean? Weiss asked. Nothing good, Naruto muttered, his mind rushing a mile a second, trying to figure out who could do something like that and why. It answered a lot of the questions the people of Remnant had and explained a lot more as well. The reason the body of a Grimm faded upon death was because the nature chakra it was made up of was returning back to the planet, or moving into the nearby plant and animal life. This was also the reason they showed such apathy to other animals, and why they had such a hunger for humans. Suffice it to say that mankind had somehow screwed up so badly in the past that Mother Nature had felt the need to fight back by giving birth to these monsters. Oh, that's bad. Nora winced as those from Remnant all cringed. We done fucked up, Young said. Wait, what? So the Grimm are the good guys? Ruby cried. But that doesn't make any sense. People rarely listen when they see something that frightens them. It's easy to see what's different, but the problem is that they're usually afraid of what's different because they don't understand it, so they fear what they don't understand, and they despise what they fear. People would rather make sure it doesn't hurt them before thinking about what it might be. That's why hostility breeds further hostility. Trust me on that. Naruto sighed heavily. So with how there's no way to learn more about Grimm, the mystery added onto their appearances and behavior make people feel threatened? Wise summed up. Naruto nodded. Being a sage and by proxy, being so in tune with the planet, Naruto always felt a little bad when he had to kill Grimm. Sure, they seemed mindless and all, but really they were just nature's anger at what humans had done to her planet. His only solace was knowing that, by killing Grimm, the plant life around them would grow all the more resilient and lively. Naruto sighed, somewhat relieved at that. So it was with a mental sigh that Naruto lodged a kunai knife into the jugular of the rather large ursai that had attempted to have him and Pira for dinner. In all honesty, the fight had been terribly one-sided. He was a well-trained shinobi with his fair share of experience, and it seemed that Pira's title of the Invincible Girl was well-earned. Pira shifted, not entirely comfortable with that. She didn't like her pedestal, after all. Combined, the two had taken the large bear like Grimm down in record time. Naruto was also quite surprised to get a peek at Pira's battle prowess. She seemed to flow like water, changing between attacking and defending with ease while still managing to dish out her fair share of blows. That fluidity also translated seamlessly into how she handled her weapon. The ease with which she transitioned her weapon from javelin, to sword, to rifle, and back again was only achievable through years of practice and dedication, though inborn talent also seemed to play a part. Sorry if that makes you feel uncomfortable, Pira. Just I'm good at noticing these things in the field. Naruto explained. The redhead nodded. That made sense. Stretching a bit, Naruto shared a smile with Pira before gesturing in the direction they had originally been sent. Shall we? The redhead nodded. Sure. Hopefully we won't run into too much opposition though. Naruto nodded in agreement. The less he had to reveal in combat the better. He did not need people asking questions, and if what Ozpin said about the teachers monitoring their progress was true, he should be all the more cautious. Passing off some of his ninjutsu as his semblance with the other teens was easy enough. What can you do with this ninjutsu stuff? Nora asked. Naruto smiled teasingly. No spoilers, Nora. He chided playfully, to which the hammer youth laughed. Okay, I'll wait then, she declared. Ren stared at the blonde ninja. No way. How in the heck had he gotten Nora to agree to that so easily? Even if he and Nora had known one another since childhood, Ren himself still had trouble getting Pink Voltage Valkyrie to relent on thing. Getting someone like Ozpin to believe it? That would be a much harder task. More like impossible, John muttered, thinking of his forged transcripts to get into Beacon. As he and his new partner made their way through the Emerald Forest, Pira was the one to strike up a conversation. I don't remember seeing you at Sanctum. So did you go to Signal? Actually, Beacon would be my first official school I'm attending. We had an academy back in my old village that trained us as well, but it wasn't reputable enough to count, so I had to take the battle exam to get into Beacon, Naruto replied. Naruto paled. He couldn't handle bookwork. But this battle exam at least sounded like something he could do, at least. Pira smiled at the chance to get to know her partner a little more. Where are you from? It was outside of the kingdoms and was built decades ago by my village's first leader, a man named Hashirama Senju. Because of all the trees that surrounded our village and acted as a natural defense, it was called Konohagakure no Sato, or the village hidden in the leaves. The green-eyed huntress in training listened attentively as Naruto spoke with an obvious fondness of his home. Yet still she noticed the bittersweet look in his eyes, almost as if his home held as many bad memories as it did good ones. It sounds like you really loved your village, Pira said with a smile. Naruto nodded. Naruto nodded his head and let a sad chuckle escape his lips. It's funny, really. When I was younger I used to run around screaming that I was going to become my village's leader someday. The armor-clad redhead giggled at the mental picture of a short blonde kid going around yelling that he was the greatest. Sounds like Ruby almost, Young joked. Hey! Naruto and Ruby both cried, glaring at her. That's still possible. After you graduate from Beacon you can still go back home and become your village's leader, right? Pira offered. Naruto shook his head. Sadly, that's no longer a possibility. Naruto paled, then stuffed his fingers in his ears and started humming loudly. He was really gonna hate this next part, he could just tell. About a year or so ago Konoha was attacked by a horde of Grimm. We tried our best to fight back, but in the end there were too many, and we were being overrun. The elders knew this, and so they made a call to have anyone under 15 flee the village so they could live. I tried to stay and fight, but my old sensei wouldn't let me, and, using his semblance, had me transported far away. Kakashi blinked. Clearly these events happened prior to his losing Obito's eye if his story counterpart had access to the Kami Jutsu. Naruto paused to clear the lump in his throat before continuing. By the time I managed to make my way back to the village it was too late. Konoha was burning and there was no one left alive. As Naruto had begun his little tale, the two had gradually slowed down until eventually, as his story ended, they had come to a full stop. As Naruto held back the very real tears that threatened to fall, Kurama tightened his hold on his container, offering only his presence as a comfort, knowing full well that despite what Naruto had said being a partial lie, a chunk of it was also very much so true. Don't judge him badly. Even a partial truth about something like that is horrible enough, Rin said, suddenly tense and trembling, his eyes wide and gripping his knees with white-knuckled hands. Pyrrha herself was holding back tears. For anyone, to go through that was heart-wrenching. Losing your home, your family, your friends, your people all in a single day? It was something she wouldn't wish on anybody. The worst part was then having to watch, helplessly, as it all went up in flames. Nora gulped heavily, looking catatonic as she put her hands to her head and started whimpering as she pulled her knees to her chest as she started hyperventilating. She grabbed Ren's hand and squeezed it fiercely, as though it were a lifeline. Everyone else looked at the two longtime friends with concern. Whatever was up with them, it was clear the last passage they just read bothered them both immensely for some reason. Whatever it was obviously painful for them, so they all decided against asking. While Naruto attempted to recompose himself, he was wondering just what in the hell had made him tell Pyrrha all of that. Granted, it wasn't the whole truth, it was still close enough to stir up the memories of what had really happened to leave him here on Remnant. Why had he felt comfortable enough with Pyrrha to tell her that? With him sharing this story with her, Pyrrha now knew more about Naruto than anyone else on Remnant. Pyrrha blinked. Naruto trusted her that much already? Sure, it was a half-truth, but still, like Rin said, the things that made you lose your home and loved ones weren't topics to tell just anyone about, especially right off the bat like that after meeting someone, and oddly enough he was okay with that. It felt good to get that off his chest, given he had spent quite a length of time talking about it with Kurama, but that was somehow different. Telling Pyrrha even a fraction of the truth lifted a weight off the blonde's shoulders, and Kurama seemed to be okay with Naruto's actions, which was a sure sign that Pyrrha was a good person, given that the Kitsune had a general dislike for all of mankind with only a small handful of exceptions. John whistled. Fox must have high standards. Feeling Pyrrha's gentle hand on his shoulder, he turned and offered the redhead a true smile. Sorry about dumping all of that on you. Kinda all just came out at once. Pyrrha just shook her head with her own genuine smile. It's fine. I can't really blame you, as that must have been a difficult part of your life. But now that we're partners, know that I'm here for you whenever you need it. Naruto pulled his fingers out of his ears and smiled at the girl gratefully. Nodding at each other, the two continued on their way through the emerald forest, the blonde feeling lighter in a manner of speaking, while the redhead felt happy knowing that her partner trusted her enough to reveal such an intimate part of his past. Miles away atop the cliff that the teens had been launched from, a very irritated Glinda Goodwitch pored over the mysterious blonde's records, at least what they had on him, which was all but non-existent. Before taking the battle exam to gain entrance to Beacon, they had nothing. For all intents and purposes, the blonde may just have dropped out of the sky, or simply come into existence, and they would know no better. The cheerful blonde was an enigma, and that aggravated Glinda to no end. Yang snickered. You got Goodwitch this stressed already? Oh, I so knew we were gonna get along great, Foxy. She told Naruto. Glinda was a woman who prided herself on being able to pick up on even the smallest of hints that allowed her to judge anyone rather accurately. She was equally proud to call herself intelligent, and yet this blonde teen was pushing the limits of that. He jumped so erratically between being a normal teen boy, a seemingly veteran warrior, and a man haunted by his past mistakes so quickly that it was hard to assess just who he really was. It both confounded her, and caused her no minor amount of irritation. Naruto shrugged. A warrior's life could do that to you. Happened a lot with Shinobi. Ozpin meanwhile stood there as an exact counterpart to the frustrated blonde woman, calmly sipping his coffee as he gazed out at the vast stretch of forest below. There was no denying it. Naruto Uzumaki was an enigma. However, Ozpin knew that Naruto was also aware of this, and there would be no strides made in unraveling said enigma without the blonde's permission. Can I say I'm starting to like the Ozpin guy? Naruto asked. Ruby smiled. He has that effect on people. Trust me, for now all anyone could do was wait. In time the blonde would grow to trust some, and only then would they be able to find the answers to the many questions that surrounded one. Naruto Uzumaki, do you really think the relics would be in a cave? Pyrrha asked her blonde companion. No! Pyrrha and John cried. They remember how well that had gone. The two had stumbled upon a rather large cave opening and were now debating on if the initiation would have them go on a spelunking trip to retrieve the relics. Should have stayed out of that cave. The Ark mumbled. Naruto shrugged before reaching up and tearing a sizable branch off of a nearby tree. Reaching into his jacket, the blonde pulled out what appeared to medical bandages, and proceeded to wrap the bindings around the top of the branch. To Pyrrha's surprise, the small fox Kit, who had seen sleeping, cracked open a single eye before bringing its tail to the top of the makeshift torch. With not even a grunt of effort, a small red flame flickered to life on the tip of the fox's tail before leaping to the torch, igniting it, and providing them a much-needed source of light. Fire, Fox! Nora cheered. Yang snickered. Cute and combat ready? Reminds me of Zwei. Ruby giggled and nodded happily. She wished the Pembroke Welsh Corgi was with them. Now that Pyrrha was focusing intently on the fox wrapped around Naruto's neck, she began to take notice of its unique features. Where other foxes were a variety of colors, Naruto's fox was a color she had never seen before. Its fur was a burnt orange color bordering on a dark red. Even the fox's tail was unique as, instead of the normal short yet fluffy tail most fox were known for, this fox's tail was quite long enough to easily wrap around Naruto's neck and drop down to his chest somewhat. Then there was its face. Stretching from the area surrounding its eyes and reaching up to its ears was a patch of black fur, which was also seen outlining its lips. It also had a rather long and skinny body that gave it an almost human-like appearance. Then there were the eyes. A crimson so vibrant, and like blood that it put her own red tresses to shame. Very much a cool-looking fox. Nora appraised. Within the seal, Kurama smirked at that. All in all, Naruto's fox was different, and seemed to even be able to understand human speech and conjure flames on a whim. Naruto snorted in amusement at that. Trust me, you guys, you haven't seen anything that proves Kurama's awesome yet. He told the Beacon students. What kind of fox is that, Naruto? Pyrrha asked, the curiosity nagging at her. The most badass kind in the world. Naruto smirked. Kurama had earned that opinion from him. Kurama turned and regarded the teen, burning crimson eyes staring at her with such intensity that it felt like the fox was peering through her, judging her very being. It left Pyrrha feeling uncomfortable. Seemingly satisfied with its judgment of her, the fox let its head fall and its eyes close, apparently going back to its napping. Naruto spoke up, returning her attention back to the blonde as he motioned for her to follow him into the cave. He's not so much a fox as he is a kitsune, a branch of the fox family, though far more intelligent and powerful, something he likes to brag about. Pyrrha just nodded her head at the vague reply, understanding that Naruto still had some secrets to keep. She didn't mind and was more than happy to wait and let Naruto tell her when he was ready. Naruto smiled, feeling grateful for that. As it was, he had already told her about a rather significant part of his past. As the two ventured even deeper into the cave, they both began to grow anxious, either liking the dark enclosed space. As they trudged on and on, there was an odd sense that they shouldn't be there, a foreboding feeling that seemed to whisper into their ear to leave and go no further. Naruto, are you sure the relics are in here? Pyrrha questioned. Right now? Not really, Naruto admitted with a chuckle. Deciding to cut their losses, the pair turned around and began to make their way back out of the cave. However, both paused in their steps upon hearing something moving just behind them. Kid, you need to go now. Pyrrha and John nodded vigorously. Without even a second thought, Naruto tossed the torch to the ground and picked up Pyrrha bridal style before pushing chakra into his legs and powering forward in a dead sprint. Pyrrha didn't even bother to ask what was going on, having seen 5 pairs of burning red eyes peering at her and Naruto through the darkness. Instead of playing the damsel in distress, Pyrrha pulled out her spear and shifted it into its rifle form before firing off a full clip at whatever was chasing them. Kakashi looked at Pyrrha. He could easily see Kushina doing the same. And no way that woman was a damsel in distress. Anyone that tried to make her out as one had their spine reshaped into a pretzel. He'd seen her do it too. Clearly whatever it was had thick armor, as she could hear the bullets bouncing off of what she suspected to be a large grim. Not one to be so easily stumped in battle, Pyrrha reached down to her belt before pulling out a different clip, this one full of rounds imbued with fire dust, giving them that much more kick. Quickly swiveling her body, the redhead looked down her sights as she fired over Naruto's shoulder. This time the bullets seemed to pierce the Grimm's armor just enough to cause it to slow down. None too soon either, as Naruto sped through the cave entrance, bringing them back into the bright light of day. Only seconds after, the cliff the cave had led into erupted into a shower of rumble as a massive scorpion-like Grimm burst through the opening, letting out a screech of hunger and power. John moaned and Pyrrha didn't look any happier about it. Needless to say, they both recalled that particular Death Stalker Grimm only too well. With acidic stinger and pincers poised to tear them to shreds, Naruto and Pyrrha shared a look before nodding. Turning on their heels, the pair began to book it as fast as they could, intent on putting space between them and the massive Death Stalker Grimm that would like to have them for lunch. Why does everything I do have to end up going horribly wrong? Naruto lamented. Naruto groaned. That's happened to me so much as it is, but in the book too? There's a tell me about it joke in that, but I'd rather not go there with the other me. Yang snapped her fingers. She got it, and it was actually pretty amusing to her. If only she made a joke about that. Meanwhile, a certain busted blonde and her raven-haired partner managed to stumble on what looked to be the remains of a long-since abandoned temple. The only standing part of the ruin was a circular platform upon which stood various stone pedestals. On those pedestals were what looked to be chess pieces of some kind. Yan turned to her silent partner and asked, "Think this is it?" Blake just gave the blonde a deadpan stare before making her way to the stone ruins. Yan shrugged before following. As the pair inspected the ruins and what they assumed to be the relics, Blake spoke. Chess pieces? Naruto and Kakashi looked to one another and shrugged. What was chess? Some of them are missing. Looks like we weren't the first ones here. Well, I guess we should pick one, Blake replied in an unsure tone. When Ozpin had said relics, they had assumed it would be some ancient and valuable artifact, not chess pieces. The other members of teams RWBY and JNPR all nodded. They had each assumed the same. How about a cute little pony? Yang cheered. Blake rolled her eyes, but it was easy to see the amusement on her face. Sure. Well, that wasn't too hard. The raven-haired teen shrugged. Well, it's not like this place is difficult to find. Still running for their life, Pyrrha and Naruto sneezed in sync. Despite the massive Grimm only yards behind them, The pair looked at each other before shrugging at the odd coincidence. The orange ninja and the Greek warrior-themed redhead both gave Blake and Yang dirty looks. Duck! Pyrrha called out as the Death Stalker attempted to skewer Naruto with its stinger. Thanks for the heads up. Naruto told her, dropping his look at the black and yellow members of Team RWBY. Anytime, the redhead smiled back. The blonde reacted quickly, curling himself into a ball and rolling to avoid the no-doubt toxic point of death. Yeah, thanks again for the heads up. I do not like the idea of ending up as a shish kebab for a bug on steroids, Naruto said. Pyrrha tossed her shield like a frisbee, hoping to cause some damage only for the scorpion on steroids to easily smack it aside with a pincer. Naruto quickly ducked and weaved through the pincers and grabbed the fallen shield before performing a short flip into the air, just in the nick of time as well, seeing as the scorpion-like Grim had attempted to catch him in one of its pincers. Naruto fell quickly back down and used the pincer as a springboard, shooting off into the air to catch up with his teammate. Landing with a roll, Naruto was quick to recover and popped up running alongside his red-haired partner. Impressive acrobatics, Ren noted with approval. The two resumed their little run from the scary thing that wants to kill us exercise. I hate that exercise. I mean it! Naruto cried, getting nods from the Beacon students, all of whom understood that completely. Naruto handing Pyrrha back her shield as they ran for all they were worth. Did you hear that? Yang asked, worry evident in her words. Blake just nodded, an equally worried look on her face. Within the span of a few seconds the sounds of fights were erupting from everywhere in the forest. Of course Yang was more worried about her sister than anyone else. Just as Yang was preparing to go out and look for her sister, the two heard a scream coming from close by. Looking up, both Blake and Yang's eyes widened when they saw a panicked Ruby falling from the sky, headed straight towards them. Heads up! For the second time in 2 days Ruby found herself falling into the arms of her shocked sister. Least it was a soft landing. Maybe the reason Yang's chest is so big is so they act as an airbag, Naruto said. Yang's jaw dropped at that as the others all smirked in amusement. Going to need to remember that one. Blake smirked. Yang pouted. Traitors. Their attention was diverted elsewhere, when a rather large Ursai Grim waltzed out of the tree lines, roaring in what seemed to be anger. Before the bear-like Grim could proceed any further there was flash of pink and a childlike exclamation of, "EHAW. That was fun!" Nora laughed. Ren rubbed his temples. No, it wasn't. Rolling from the now more than likely dead Ursai's back was a pouting Nora Valkyrie. Ah, it's broken. Everyone looked at Nora. Has she? Her partner and friend, Ren, clambered over the fallen form of the Grim, panting and looking quite exhausted. Nora, don't ever do that again, the raven-haired teen said in between gasps for air. Looking up he realized that he was only talking to himself, and that Nora had made her way to the ruins, clearly entertained by the shiny golden chess pieces. Grabbing her rook she began to dance around proclaiming, "I'm queen of the castle, I'm queen of the castle." Ren nodded. She has. He muttered, exhausted. Tired and frustrated by the day's events, Ren barked out, "Nora!" The eccentric orange-haired girl immediately stopped her dance, the rook planted precariously on her head, and saluted her friend, coming Ren. Stunned, Blake was the one to voice the question on everyone's mind. Did that girl just ride in on an Ursa? Yes, thank you, Captain Obvious. Blake glared at John, making a note to hurt him later. Both Yang and Ruby, who was still in her sister's arms, continued to gape at the very odd girl. Before any other questions could be asked, their attention was turned to the tree line where a running Naruto and Pyrrha emerged. Following shortly behind them was a massive Death Stalker who looked intent on having the pair for lunch, tearing up trees as it did so. Again Blake was the one to address the obvious. Did they seriously run all the way here with a Death Stalker on their tail? The two in question looked at Blake. Truly your deductive skills are a wonder. Naruto said dryly. Can any of you figure out a way to kill the monster bug trying to eat my and Pyrrha's other selves now? He asked while the redhead nodded. Blake gave Naruto an annoyed look, but she understood why that'd be an issue for the whiskered teen. Obviously at her wit's end with all the odd occurrences happening, Yang exploded literally. I can't take it anymore. Could everyone chill out for 2 seconds before something crazy happens again? Chill out, huh? Well, Pyrrha and I would love to do that, but we've got a giant bug trying to kill us, Naruto said. Pyrrha nodded, wondering why no one helped with that back during initiation in her actual world, too. As Yang seethed in frustration, Blake calmly stood there with her arms crossed. Ren finally caught up to the group, still slightly out of breath while Nora acted like everything was normal, and stood there fidgeting. Ruby was staring at the sky with a worried look before she tugged on her sister's sleeve like a small child. Yang let her head fall in frustration, not even wanting to know what else was going to happen. Still she and the others looked up only to be shocked yet again. There was Weiss Schnee flying by hanging onto the talon of a Nevermore, a very large Nevermore. Weiss blanched at the reminder of that ride. How could you leave me? The Schnee heiress managed to cry over the howling winds. Ruby shrugged. I said jump. Blake decided to chime in with her usual monotone. She's gonna fall. She'll be fine. Ruby waved. I was not. Weiss snapped at her team leader. I said jump. Why is it my fault you didn't listen? Ruby pouted. Joining the conversation, Ren stated the obvious. She's falling. Meanwhile the still running Naruto and Pyrrha peered up at the sky seeing the falling Weiss. Internally Naruto sighed. Damn my hero complex. I've been in situations where I needed help, but those that could help me and knew I needed it wouldn't give it to me. And I don't want to be that guy, you know? Naruto explained himself, awkwardly scratching at the back of his head. The Beacon students all nodded. That was understandable. Putting on the brakes, Naruto came to a sudden halt and turned to face the rampaging Death Stalker. Pira came to a stop a few yards after Naruto had and shouted out the blonde in worry, "Naruto! What are you doing? Something crazy in the name of keeping Waishi from ending up a mangled smear on the ground." Naruto said, "And I thank you for that." The heiress said. Naruto sheepishly grinned before turning to the oncoming Grim with a serious look to his whiskered face. The teen crouched low, preparing for something, what exactly that was no one knew. The blonde tended to do the unexpected it seemed. Kakashi laughed at that assessment of his student. "You have no idea." This was further proven by Naruto's next move. As the Death Stalker was only feet away from Naruto, the teen leapt up, landing directly on the white armor-like plating of the massive Grim. Naruto didn't stop there however, and began to sprint across the Grim's back. In seconds flat Naruto had covered the entirety of the scorpion-like Grim's back and was running up its outstretched tail. Reaching the tip, Naruto crouched before launching himself through the air. "Foxy, you're nuts," Yon said, then grinned. "I like it." "You're wild," Naruto smirked. "Molds were made to be broken, and being able to do so is the sign of a true badass, am I right?" The heavy hitter of RWBY nodded, giving a thumbs up at that. Using a small amount of wind chakra, Naruto pushed himself forward, just in time to catch Weiss in his arms. "Fancy meeting you here, princess," was Naruto's cheeky comment. John's jaw dropped. Oh, come on. Why was this other blonde male so much smoother than he was? Sure, John knew he abysmal starting out, but it was hard seeing how well Naruto did without feeling jealous. Weiss glared at Naruto. "Are you going to try flirting with me?" she asked. She did not need another person acting like that to her. "Nope, I just like witty banter," he replied. At that, the Shnee calmed down. Weiss huffed in annoyance. "Not that I'm ungrateful, but what now?" "We're both falling to the ground in case you didn't notice." Naruto took on a pensive look before shrugging casually, as if falling from 100 or so feet wasn't anything to worry about. "Been there, done that," the ninjas both said as casually as if that was talking about the weather. Everyone else looked at Naruto and Kakashi. Weiss face palmed and angrily muttered to herself, "Ugh. Boys." Without even batting an eye, the Shnee heiress reached to her side and pulled out the silver rapier sheath at her side. Pointing it below them, she called upon her semblance, creating a complex set of what looked to be runes below them. Naruto looked at the glyphs with a critical eye. Naruto suddenly looked interested. The Uzumaki clan was known for two things: their incredible longevity, and their innate prowess in the art of fuinjutsu. Their longevity allowed them to survive what most would consider mortal wounds and continue fighting. Impressive resilience, Blake noted. "So these Uzumaki guys were like cockroaches?" Yang asked. Kakashi had to grab Naruto to keep in from attacking Yang at the unintended jab at the Uzumaki family, and their ability to take a hit with their longevity and durability. As within the seal, Kurama hooted with laughter, fully agreeing with the lilac-eyed blonde's assessment. "Yang!" Ruby cried. "Apologize." "Now, the Uzumaki talent for the sealing arts." "Sealing arts?" Weiss asked. "Help them earn infamy as one of the most powerful clans and villages around. They were so feared that during a previous war it had taken the power of 3 of the 5 great shinobi villages to take them down, and even then the villages only succeeded in forcing the Uzumaki clan to spread across the different countries." The Beacon group all gaped at that as Naruto winced. Naruto's father, while not of the Uzumaki clan, was also a powerful and knowledgeable user of fuinjutsu. The man's genius had allowed him to perfect the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique, a jutsu that allowed the user to bend space and time so they could teleport instantaneously. "Oh man, that sounds so awesome!" Ruby cheered. With the technique, Naruto's father had slaughtered a whole battalion of enemy shinobi in seconds flat. "And the awesome just died," John said as the Beacon students looked horrified at the use Naruto's father had put the technique to, having figured shinobi was a profession similar to that of being a huntsman, or huntress. Grudges that evolved into war. Blake sighed at last, then looked at Naruto solemnly. "That's why your dad had to put the skill to that kind of use, isn't it?" Naruto stared at the cat girl, shocked at how she knew that, and part of him not wanting to know how she knew that, then reluctantly nodded to it, feeling sick as he did so. Blake shuddered, not looking pleased at being right, yet more understanding as to why Naruto's father had his hand forced to use the ability to that means. It was then that he had earned his title as the Konoha no Kiroi Senko, Yellow Flash of Konoha. As the son to an Uzumaki in the Yellow Flash, Naruto had inherited his parents' proclivity to seals and the runes Weiss had just called upon with a whim absolutely fascinated him. "Oh. So my glyphs are similar to these seal arts then?" Weiss asked. Naruto nodded. Weiss looked very interested in that. If that were true, she and Naruto would need to compare notes. Had the Uzumakis been able to write their seals on thin air, they would have been that much more powerful, and probably been able to fight back the forces that had destroyed their home. Considering that despite Weiss taking care of the current situation, there was still a pissed-off Nevermore and Death Stalker to deal with, Naruto decided to push his fascination with Weiss' semblance to the back of his mind. Priorities are important. Weiss agreed. Landing on the very solid rune formation, Naruto waited to see if Weiss was going to continue to help considering they were still quite high in the air. Again Weiss huffed before creating several of the rune platforms, all of which descended in a manner that made them resemble a staircase. Naruto shrugged and proceeded to hop his way down using the aura-created platforms. As they touched back down on solid ground and Naruto placed the white-haired teen on her feet, he began to have flashbacks to a certain pink-haired teammate of his as Weiss chewed him out. Some hero you are. I may as well have saved myself. Well, why didn't you? Everyone looked at the white-dressed heiress who sputtered as she tried to come up with a response to that. Weiss sputtered to come up with a rebuttal, and when none came she resorted to her go-to maneuver of huffing and pouting. Weiss's friends all burst out laughing. Weiss glared at Naruto, first with shaking the dust around, now this. Was he out to get her or something? I swear she's like Sasuke and Sakura rolled into one except in white, Naruto quipped. Who are those two? Weiss asked, interested. Naruto rolled his eyes. Trust me, better off not knowing. Kurama was more than happy to throw in his own 2 cents. Just be happy we don't have to deal with her. Kami knows I would end up either murdering her or myself, probably the former. In fact, what? Weiss cried, paling. No, Kurama, we are not murdering Weiss. Weiss sighed, relieved at that. She sent a nod to Naruto. Remember, she's the heiress to a wealthy and powerful family, and you're a shinobi. You were trained for these kinds of missions. Okay, look, we have a giant-ass scorpion and an even bigger bird to deal with right now. Not the time to be discussing the assassination of an heiress. Never thought I'd feel grateful to Grim, Weiss said. Yeah, Kurama never liked Sasuke or Sakura very much. He loathed Sasuke especially, in fact. Naruto explained. Weiss nodded, cringing at that. You say that like these pests actually pose a problem. You and I both know that even the old dumbass you could handle these things with little difficulty. Yeah, well, I don't exactly want to just toss out a few jutsu and have people asking questions. Not right now, at least. Kurama grinned in satisfaction at his container's answer. My kid, you really are my Jinchuriki, power of the human sacrifice. Everyone winced at that title. Naruto chose to ignore the comment, already knowing what the fox meant by that. As he became more of a shinobi, he also became more like a fox, becoming trickier and more cunning. Necessary qualities for a huntsman, Rin said, knowing while the strength helped, you couldn't just brute force everything. Funny how in the shinobi era he had been anything but. Now during this time of hunters and huntresses he was becoming more like a true shinobi. Shaking those thoughts off, Naruto felt Pyrrha next to him, panting a bit with a slight sheen of sweat covering her. No doubt from the little marathon run they had been motivated to take part in. Pyrrha nodded, recalling how bad she'd wanted a shower after that. At seeing Pyrrha's appearance, Yang chose to sarcastically cheer. Great, the gang's all here. Now we can all die together. Ruby piped up, intent on proving to everyone there that she was just as capable of a warrior as any of them. Not if I can help it. Ruby groaned, recalling this moment. Not her best. Before anyone could stop the young teen, Ruby was off in a dead sprint, charging towards the oncoming Death Stalker with her massive scythe trailing behind her and cloak fluttering in the wind. Obviously worried for her sister, Yang called out, Ruby. Wait. Naruto meanwhile could only sigh and facepalm. Kami, damn it. With a cheeky grin on his face, Kurama piped in. Remind you of anyone? You are so gonna die. Naruto seethed as Kakashi snorted in a laughter. Naruto only responded with a glare. Not a word. Kurama said nothing more, with only the sounds of his booming laughter echoing through Naruto's head as his response. The Beacon group looked at Naruto. You were like that too when you started out? Yang snickered, unable to believe it. Shut up. Naruto snapped, embarrassed. I had a lot to prove at first. Okay. Ruby nodded firmly. She understood that feeling perfectly. Sighing, Naruto prepared himself for the more than likely inevitable rescuing he would have to do again. It wasn't that he thought Ruby was weak, far from it. After all, she wielded that big-ass scythe of hers like it was a feather. However, she wasn't exactly thinking straight right now. Running towards a massive Grim screaming bloody murder wasn't the brightest of ideas, no matter how skilled you were. Ruby winced. He and the others winced in sync as they saw Ruby power herself forward with the help of the recoil from the gun portion of her scythe gun thing? Ruby raged. Crescent Rose was a badass weapon she'd crafted herself. It was her baby. Even still, she was too slow, as the Death Stalker was able to smack her aside like she was nothing but an annoying fly. Ruby hid in her cloak and hood again at the reminder of that. Struggling to stand, no doubt dazed from the blow, Ruby yelled out in a strained voice, "Dee, don't worry. Totally fine." Kakashi looked back and forth between Naruto and Ruby. "I think a blood test might be in order with how like you two are. Might end up being related," he said to the pair of embarrassed teens. Turning around, Ruby realized far too late that the Grim had taken the opportunity to close the distance between them, now staring at her hungrily. Panicking, she fired off a shot at its face, serving only to irritate it, and turned and began to run as fast her legs could carry her. Yang saw the obvious danger her sister was in and began to sprint her way to Ruby. Luck wasn't with them, as it seemed the Nevermore had decided to help its fellow Grim and circled around. With a mighty flap of its wings it unleashed a rain of its own feathers, the points of which were as sharp as any blade. Like gunfire they rained down onto the ground, embedding themselves deep into the earth. Murphy's Law decided to rear its head, and one of the feathers managed to catch up to Ruby and run straight through her cloak, pinning her to the ground. "Capes are very non-functional," Weiss said. "Are so?" RWBY argued. Oh really? Let's look at a few famous hunters and huntresses then. Thunderhead? Storm Semblance? Nice man, good with kids. All was well, another day saved, when his cape snagged on a missile fin. Stratigale. Cape caught in a jet turbine. Metaman, express elevator. Dynaguy, snagged on takeoff. Splashdown, sucked into a vortex. No capes. RWBY whimpered as her bestie said all that. Several more of the feathers managed to find their way to Yang, causing her to stumble so that she could avoid being skewered to death. Racing to her feet, she saw RWBY frantically tugging at her pinned cloak in an attempt to free herself. RWBY! Get out of there! A very much so panicking RWBY answered back. I'm trying. Why not use your scythe and cut the cape off? Kakashi asked. Never! RWBY cried, hugging the article of clothing. Turning to look upwards as a shadow covered her, the red-haired teen turned wide gray eyes to see the Death Stalker prepping its massive stinger, aimed straight at her. Clenching her eyes, the young teen prepared for the worst. Seconds ticked by, and when there was no pain, she wearily opened her eyes to see a wall of ice holding the stinger of the Death Stalker back. The voice of Weiss came up as the Grim struggled to free its tail. Ugh, you are so childish, Weiss. Standing from her crouched position, Weiss only continued on her mini-rant, and dim-witted, and hyperactive, and don't even get me started on your fighting style. Kakashi looked to Naruto as the story listed off what Weiss had thought of RWBY. Damn, he and RWBY were a lot more alike than the masked man thought. On my parents' graves, so help me, I will burn you books if you so much as think it. Naruto growled, glaring at the man. Kakashi quickly looked away, knowing the threat to his beloved Makeout series books was no bluff. Though I suppose I can be a bit difficult, but if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do this together. Naruto stared. Sheesh. He was seeing the parallels between RWBY and Weiss's relationship and his and Sasuke's. Sighing in what appeared to be mock frustration, the white-haired teen continued, so if you quit trying to show off, I'll be nicer. RWBY shook her head. I'm not trying to show off. I want you to know I can do this. RWBY nodded. I had a lot to prove. Needed to show it wasn't a mistake that I was given a place where I was. Weiss nodded. She understood the need to prove oneself. It was part of what she disliked about her father. You're fine. As Weiss waltzed off, RWBY let out a breath she didn't even know she was holding. Normal knees. Why be normal anyways? Conform too much, and you lose sight of what makes you who you are and what makes you unique. Naruto said. If you were allowed into Beacon the way you were, it means there's something special about you. Something extraordinary that you aren't even aware of. Are you willing to throw that away just to become just another face in the crowd, RWBY? You're better than that. Just be you and never give up and you'll go far, I know it. RWBY smiled, feeling touched that Naruto felt that way, and he believed in her like that. As Yang raced to crush her sister to death in a hug, Naruto smiled. Guess Princess isn't as bad as we thought. Once the teens had all regrouped, Naruto decided to voice the obvious. I doubt Princess Ice Prison is gonna hold that thing for long, and we also have a rather angry Nevermore circling back around. For once Weiss was the one to voice her opinion. Look, there's no sense in dilly-dallying, our objective is right in front of us. RWBY chimed in with her agreement. She's right, our mission is to grab an artifact and make it back to the cliffs. There's no point in fighting these things. Everyone seemed to nod in agreement with the pair's assessment, while Yang looked at her sister with noticeable pride. I was and still am proud of her. Yang smiled. Naruto shrugged. So tactical retreat then? With a round of nods, those who hadn't already retrieved an artifact made their way up to the platform. Naruto observed the options before noticing that there seemed to be doubles of each piece. Why would they do that? Sure, doubles of a piece, but to have two in the same color? Unless that whole partner speech was only half the truth and they plan on putting two pairs together to form a full team. Man, this is like Kakashi's spell test all over again. Nope. Kakashi objected, shrugging and decided to let the pieces fall where they would. Naruto grabbed a golden rook piece while he saw RWBY grab a golden knight piece. He offered a smile and thumbs up, silently praising her on her plan. RWBY giggled at Naruto's cheesy gesture before smiling back. The two walked back to their partners and their group just in time to see the Death Stalker beginning to crack its icy prison. You didn't run right away? The battle-experienced Jonin marveled. As it freed its stinger and shattered the ice that had held, Naruto turned to the group. And that would be our cue to get the hell out of here. The others nodded with him, turned, and began to book it back towards the cliffs. As they ran, the sun was eclipsed by the massive shadow of the Nevermore flying above them. Spotting even more ruins ahead of them, the group attempted to take cover as even more of the Grimm's feathers hailed down. Flying ahead, the Grimm perched itself at the top of what remained of a stone tower, blocking them from reaching the cliffs that lay just beyond it. To make matters worse, the Death Stalker decided to make its appearance, pinning the group between it and the waiting Nevermore. Rock and hard place, Young said. Mentally cursing, Naruto reached for the scroll at his side. As he unfurled it, he and the others had decided they had a better chance of making it around the Nevermore than they did staying and trying to fight both it and the Death Stalker. Biting his thumb hard enough to draw blood, getting curious looks from the others as he did so, the blonde ran his bloody digit across the scroll. What followed was a poof of smoke that obscured Naruto from everyone's vision. What was that about? Weiss asked. Sealing scroll. Used as a medium to create an artificial hammer space within the scroll and store items within it. Naruto explained. Weiss whistled. She wished her glyphs could do that. It'd be great for shopping sprees. Swiping a hand through the air, Naruto cleared enough of the smoke to reveal that he was now holding what they assumed to be his weapon. Let us see. RWBY said, eager to see what Naruto's weapon was. Gripped tightly in his hands as he stared the Deathstalker down was a shakujo, or monk's staff, that was easily a few inches taller than him. The metallic pole was a deep ebony black, seeming to absorb the very light around it. The ring that sat atop of the staff was a burnt orange color, matching the color of Kurama's fur almost exactly. Running vertically through the ring was a simple bar covered in black leather. Stitched into the leather were etchings of 6 Magatama, comma-shaped symbols. Instead of the usual rings that dangled from the main ring, Naruto's shakujo had 9 short lengths of chain hanging from it. Naruto whistled. Hot damn memo to me, get or make that weapon. With his back turned to them, the blonde called out, you guys go and get to the cliffs. Me and Kurama will hold off this overgrown bug. Okay, you I get, but how can that fox help? John asked. Naruto shook his head at his fellow blonde's word. If Ark only knew. As if to show them he was more than capable of holding the two grim off, Naruto spun the staff around and to their slight shock flames began to dance on the chain links. Sweeping it through the air in front of him, Naruto unleashed a ball of flames aimed straight at the Deathstalker. Katon, Gokake no Jutsu, Fire Release, Grand Fireball Technique. Naruto's jaw dropped. What? But I never learned any of my elemental attributes except wind, he cried. No experimenting on your own, Naruto. Kakashi abolished. Naruto glared at the silver-haired man at that. Well, maybe I wouldn't need to if the one assigned to help me learn things like that actually taught me more than a single subject once every 3 years. Never even made a clone to help me. Kakashi winced at the jab. He deserved that. Other than tree climbing, he hadn't taught Naruto a thing. Then 3 years later, he only taught Naruto his elemental affinity. No wonder Jiraiya had to apprentice Naruto. Kakashi had acknowledged he was an awful mentor and teacher already, but it still stung having that thrown in his face. The Grim, unable to move its lumbering body fast enough, took the brunt of the inferno directly to its face. The group heard a screech of pain come from the Grim, but Blake frowned, not to be a grammar Nazi, but as a lover of literature, I need to ask why there's an apostrophe there, so it's where rather than where? She asked. Everyone shrugged. No clue. None too surprised to see it come out with only a few scorch marks on its armor. To Naruto's surprise, Pira appeared at his side, taking a knee, and aiming down her sights at the Grim before unloading on it. We're partners, so that means we stick together, was Pira's reply to Naruto's unspoken question. Sheesh, wish I had teammates that stood by me like that back home from the start. Naruto muttered. Sakura constantly belittled and abused him for the slightest thing, even saying hello to her, and Sasuke had tried to kill him several times. It really was a wonder that Naruto lacked any psychological and trust issues after all his dealings with those two as teammates. Yan grinned, and with a flick of her arms, the yellow bracelets on her wrist extended, covering her hands and extending a few inches past her wrists. RWBY unclasped her weapon, and with a quick spin it was in its scythe form. Nora giggled and twirled her own weapon around, revealing it to be a massive war hammer. Both Weiss and then sighed before simply pulling out their own weapons and taking a ready stance. Guess we make a stand here, huh, Foxy? Yan quipped as the Nevermore circled above them like a vulture. Naruto grinned right back at his fellow blonde. Looks like it, firecracker. Yan laughed at the nickname Naruto had decided to give her, feeling it fit her perfectly. Cut, print, and watermark. I like it. Yan nodded in agreement with her other self. Seeing the two Grim closing in, Ren decided to be the voice of reason. So what's the plan? Naruto let a feral grin stretch across his face. Hit M hard, and hit M fast. That's your plan? John cried. I like it. RWBY chimed in. Weiss could only face palm. Of course you would like that plan. Twirling his shakujo with his fingers, Naruto crouched low, less talking, more fighting. Sir, yes sir. Nora and Yang both laughed, and with a burst of speed the blonde was gone, making a beeline straight for the Deathstalker. Pira nodded at Nora, giving the girl the unspoken order to follow the blonde's lead as she and Ren provided covering fire. With a cheer, the hammer-wielding girl fired off a shot, the recoil pushing her forward and through the air. I love doing that. Nora giggled. Don't forget about me, Foxy. Yang called out as she chased after Nora and her fellow blonde. This I want to see. Naruto said, wondering how his counterpart and his impromptu team would squash the Bugzilla. The members of JNPR all nodded with the exception of John Ark. Said team leader was pouting at seeing how much more capable the other male blonde was. It made him feel inferior and insecure. And where the heck was his other, anyways? Taking a knee while Ren and Blake stood next to her, Pira and the two raven-haired teens began to unleash a hail of bullets, hoping to cause enough of an annoyance to the Deathstalker to give Yang, Nora, and Naruto an opening to use. Seeing that the group was more than capable of handling the Deathstalker, RWBY and Weiss turned their eyes skyward, watching the Nevermore as it circled around them. Nodding to Weiss, RWBY folded her scythe into its rifle form before taking a knee and aiming upwards. Weiss stood over her and used her semblance to create a circle of runes that burned a fiery shade of red. Using the scope on her weapon, RWBY took aim at the Nevermore as it turned to focus on them. Finally getting the gargantuan bird in her sights, RWBY pulled the trigger of her rifle, letting a bullet fly from the barrel before it collided with the rune Weiss had created. Emerging out of the circle was not a bullet, but now a blazing ball of flames, hurtling through the air straight at the Nevermore. Cocking her gun yet again, Ruby let another bullet fly, creating another flaming projectile. Seeing the blazing orbs flying straight at it, the Nevermore attempted to change its course, but due to its large size it was unable to do so quickly enough. As a consequence for its lack of maneuverability, the Grim took both of the fireballs straight to the wing, causing it enough pain to make it screech. Still the Grim seemed only to be made even angrier by this. Glaring at Ruby and Weiss, it began to flap its mighty wings. Instead of the expected hail of feathers, though, there was only a heavy increase in the wind speed, enough of an increase to cause both Ruby and Weiss to be flung off their feet, tumbling away from the rest of the group. Looking up from her position on top of the Death Stalker, Yang saw her sister being flung away from the others and was quick to react. Naruto saw the same thing and knew Yang would want to make it to her sister as quick as possible. Yang, the busted teen, turned to the blue-eyed Uzumaki and saw him gesture to his cupped hands. Understanding the gesture, she rushed towards Naruto. With a slight hop she placed her right foot into the cupped hands of Naruto. Pushing down as Naruto pushed up, Yang was propelled up and over Naruto. Firing off a shot from the gauntlets on her hands, Yang used the recoil to push her further and faster through the air. Seeing her partner headed towards them, and seeing where she was no doubt aiming, Blake unwrapped most of the ribbon that she used to tie her weapon to her hand and flung the gun portion of it towards the flying Yang. The blonde grabbed the gun and with a heave Blake managed to swing her partner around, giving her that much more momentum. As Yang chased after her sister, Blake turned to Pyrrha, silently communicating her want to follow her partner. The redhead understood quickly and offered her shielded back in return. Blake nodded gratefully before running towards Pyrrha. With a spin, Blake changed her direction as she landed on Pyrrha's shield, making her face the direction in which Yang had gone. With a shove, Blake pushed herself off the bronze surface with enough force to send her off in a fashion similar to Yang. Turning her gaze back to the Death Stalker, Pyrrha's sweat dropped as she saw Nora happily wailing on the Grim with her hammer, surprisingly causing slight dents in its armor. Naruto, while more restrained, was still as odd as he jabbed his Shikujo into the few areas where the Grim's armor didn't cover. Still, all of this only served to make the Grim that much angrier. Like a bucking bull, the Death Stalker crouched, and then quickly raised itself, sending both Nora and Naruto flying off its back. Naruto flipped in the air, landing perfectly on his feet like nothing had happened. Nora was a little more flamboyant about her landing, curling into a ball and then uncurling at the perfect time to land on her feet. Flinging her arms into the air like a gymnast, she called out, "Ta-da!" Naruto held up a small white paper with the number 9 written on it. Kurama unfurled his tail, and on it was grasped a similar white paper with the number 6 on it. Nora pouted. "Meanies, I gave you a 9 out of 10. Naruto complained. Nora pouted. "I was going for a perfect 10. Rin shook his head while Pyrrha giggled at the odd trio. "Guys, I don't mean to interrupt, but there is still the matter of the Death Stalker to deal with," Pyrrha pointed out. Naruto nodded as he warily stared at the Death Stalker. "None of our weapons can pierce that armor of its, even with Nora's help." Moving as one, the group evaded the pincer that had slammed into where they had just been standing, the impact causing a small dust cloud to form. The Death Stalker roared in frustration as its prey escaped it once again. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto continued his speech, "But it doesn't have any armor on its belly. That's where we gotta hit." Taking into account what he knew of his impromptu team's abilities, Naruto tried to think of a plan that would give them the opening they needed, something easier said than done. "Man, it's times like this I wish I had Shikamaru with me. He was lazy as hell, but would have had like 20 different plans on how to take this thing down by now." Naruto sighed. "Freakishly super genius strategist," Naruto muttered, agreeing with his other. Running his gaze over the Death Stalker that was now making its way towards them again, Naruto took note of another place its armor didn't cover. With a grin, the blonde Uzumaki called out, "Legs!" The other 3 teens regarded the Grim and instantly saw what Naruto meant. Having come up with the idea and being the fastest of the 4, Naruto led the charge, Pyrrha following behind him, Nora behind her, and Rin bringing up the rear. Just as the Death Stalker attempted to catch them in its pincers, the group split into its pairs, Naruto and Pyrrha rushing off to the right side while Nora and Rin took the left. Firing off shots from his twin pistols, Rin was able to punch holes in the legs of the Grim. Thanks to their weakened integrity, he was able to quickly use the blades attached to his pistols and slice through 2 limbs with ease. Nora, on the other hand, made a show of it by using her hammer like a baseball bat, swinging at the Death Stalker's exposed limbs with enough force to turn the bones in them into a fine powder. On the opposite side of the odd pair, Naruto and Pyrrha were handling their side with just as much ease. Pyrrha had transitioned her weapon into its short sword form and with her superior strength, cleanly cut straight the bottom half of the Grim's leg. Tossing her shield like a deadly frisbee, she was able to just as quickly take care of the second leg. Naruto followed behind her, and gripped the bar that lay inside the ring portion of his Shikujo. With a tug, Naruto revealed that hidden inside the pole of the staff was a razor-sharp blade, the staff portion of the Shikujo having acted as a sheath for it. The blade itself had only a single edge and lacked a curve, meaning that it was a Chikudo-class blade. "Awesome! A sword stick," Ruby said. "A what?" Weiss asked. "A sword stick, or cane sword, is a cane incorporating a concealed blade. The sword stick serves as a popular fashion accessory for the wealthy during times when it's less socially acceptable to openly carry a sword, but there are still upper-class men routinely trained in swordsmanship who wish to go armed for self-defense. Swords concealed in ladies' walking sticks and parasols are also not unknown. Malacca wood is the most commonly used material in making the cane shafts, and the standard grip was rounded and metallic. Today, designer and collector canes have sterling silver handles, and are made with wooden shafts made from various woods, including malacca and bamboo. Ornate designs, such as animal heads, skulls, and various emblems may also be carved into the wooden handles. These may make them harder to wield, but some find them more attractive. Sword canes are most often made with stainless steel, rapier-pointed blades. While various mechanisms exist to lock the blade in place, accidents have been known to happen regularly with the simple push-to-release mechanism. Twist-lock mechanisms work well, as do double-locking mechanisms. Soon after their introduction, other gadget canes became popular. Instead of a blade, these would hold the tools of one's trade, compasses, and even flasks for keeping alcohol. Everyone stared at Ruby with the exception of Yang, used to her sister being such a walking weapon dictionary like that. 10 would like her, Naruto muttered. Who? Yang asked. A friend of mine from back home. Biggest weapons fanatic on the entire continent we're from. Although she prefers the term armament connoisseur, she can see a weapon once and go on about it the same way Ruby just did. Naruto chuckled with a smile. Ruby looked ecstatic about that. Finally! A weapons buddy! Someone she could discuss mods and ammo all the time with. And she really liked that armament connoisseur term. It all excited her. Wait, there's two? Weiss asked, looking horrified at the idea of a weapons nerd that was just as bad, if not worse than Ruby. Can you introduce us? Ruby pleaded, her eyes shining. Naruto laughed. Don't know how, but if I can, I will, Ruby. He smiled, amused by her sheer enthusiasm. Funneling his wind chakra through it, Naruto was able to enhance its cutting power even more while also giving it an almost ethereal glow. With his sharpened sword, the blonde was able to easily cleave through the remaining legs of the Death Stalker like a hot knife through butter. Timber! Naruto and Nora both cheered, then looked at one another in surprise, then they shared a laugh. Jumping away, Naruto joined the rest of his group as they watched the now legless Death Stalker cry out in pain and collapse to the ground. Without missing a heartbeat, Naruto called out, Nora! Now! Giving their impromptu leader a mock salute with a goofy grin stretched across her face, Nora responded, Yes sir. Letting her hammer fall to the ground, Nora charged straight at the immobile form of the Grim. As the eccentric teen closed the distance between her and the Death Stalker, Nora hefted her hammer up, and as the weapon was inches away from its target, the orange-haired teen pulled the trigger on the handle, firing off a rocket and sending the hammer smashing against the underside of the Death Stalker's jaw. Due to the recoil from the shot, the hammer plowed into the Grim with the force of a train. Far too distracted by the pain of losing its limbs, the Grim was unable to defend itself in any way and took the full brunt of the attack, sending it into the air briefly before it collapsed on its side. Thanks to its rounded shape, the Death Stalker rolled onto its back, exposing its unprotected underbelly. The group of four took advantage of the opportunity presented to them, and quickly leapt on top of the now thrashing Grim. Ren was the first to attack, unleashing a hail of bullets straight into the exposed underside of the Grim's skill and then leaping off. Using the new opening given to her by the long-haired male, Pira was able to jab her spear further into the flesh of the Death Stalker. As she leapt off to join Ren, Naruto jammed his own weapon into the exposed flesh, his sword now standing perpendicular to Pira's spear. With a mighty swing, Nora smashed her hammer against the bottoms of the two weapons simultaneously, sending both Naruto and Pira's weapons tunneling through the skull of the Grim like a pair of railroad spikes. Boo-I-8. Suck it, Jumbo! Naruto said, amusing the others as Pira, Ren and Nora all nodded. The two sharp weapons pierced straight through the Death Stalker's skull, coming out the other side and ending up in the ground below the now unmoving corpse. As the body of the Death Stalker began to fade into the wind, the four teens began celebrating their victory over the massive Grim. Nora let out a cheer of excitement, while Ren collapsed to the floor with a sigh and shake of his head. Pira and Naruto shared a simple high-five and smile. Turning his head along with the others, Naruto let a grin stretch across his face as he witnessed RWBY coordinate her own group. The four worked in a surprisingly synchronized fashion for having only worked together for a few minutes, if that. Yang and Blake provided the distraction, with the Ravenette also providing her unusually long and elastic ribbon for RWBY, creating a makeshift slingshot. Weiss then created a circle of ruins that he assumed would speed up RWBY even more. Team RWBY all smiled at the memory. Their first team combo. Naruto was proven correct as RWBY soared through the air, the combination of the recoil from her side's gun half and Weiss glyphs pushing her to very impressive speeds. What happened next threw even Naruto for a loop. RWBY hooked her scythe around the throat of the Nevermore, her feet landing solidly against the cliff face. Weiss again created more runes, making a line of them that drove straight up the cliff. RWBY used the runes to stick herself to the sheer cliff wall and began to give gravity the finger by scaling up the rocky wall, dragging the Nevermore behind her. Firing off shots at a constant rate, RWBY was able to maintain her speed and quickly cover the entirety of the cliff in the matter of a few seconds. Reaching the cliff's plateau, the body of the Nevermore was stuck underneath the lip of said plateau. Another shot and a burst of speed from what he assumed to be her semblance, and Ruby's side cleaved straight through the Nevermore's neck, severing the head from the rest of its body. As the now headless corpse began to fall down the abyss at the bottom of the cliff, even Naruto had to admit what he had just seen was pretty damn awesome. To tie all together, there Ruby stood at the cliff top, scythe in hand, her cloak fluttering in the wind, while rose petals left over from her semblance fell around her. Grinning Naruto let out a whistle of appreciation at the sight. I agree with the other me, very nice image and impressive feat, Whirlwind. Naruto smiled at Ruby. Whirlwind? Ruby asked, tilting her head. Naruto shrugged, you're fast as one. Besides, sounds cool for a title with your name. Whirlwind Ruby, Ruby Whirlwind Rose, Rose Whirlwind Ruby tested a few combinations of the title and her name, then beamed and nodded. Naruto was right. It was a cool-sounding title for her. She loved it. Impressive for a Nigen, human, Kurama groused. Stubborn old fox, Naruto retorted. Blonde-haired idiot. Furball. Stupid monkey. Everyone's sweat dropped when they turned to see Naruto choking his fox while said quadruped was clawing at his face. The sweat drops grew even larger when the duo fell to the floor, Naruto throwing punches while Kurama bit and scratched. Take that back, you Baka Kitsune, idiot fox, you two fight like brothers. Yang noted. Naruto nodded. Naruto stood with his arms behind his head as he listened to Ozpin announce the names of the team that had finished before he and the others had. His suspicion about two pairs being placed together to make teams of four being proven correct. Him and Kurama had only raised an eyebrow at seeing another parallel between the military's system of remnant and the shinobi villages. It seemed that the saying of if it ain't broke, then don't fix it was a universal truth. I wish people always take things that already work, make it more complicated, and assume the complicated means it's better. Hate that. Blake muttered. When it came time for him, Pira, Nora, and Rin to step up, he did so with a grin on his face. Ozpin turned to regard the 4 teens that stood before him, though his gaze lingered on the blonde male of the team for a little bit longer than the others. Naruto Uzumaki. Nora Valkyrie. Pira Nikos. Lai Rin. The 4 of you retrieved the gold rook pieces. From this day forward you will work together as Team NNPR, Napier. Napier, huh? Rin said, wondering how Naruto's presence as opposed to John's would alter the team dynamic. Nora cheered and hugged Rin, who was attempting to hide his own smile. Naruto only grinned as he and Pira exchanged a congratulatory look. Ozpin coughed to gain their attention again and continued, the leader of which will be Naruto Uzumaki. Well, can't say that was undeserved with how you lead the makeshift team. Kakashi said. Cheers and clapping came from the audience while Pira offered Naruto a smile and a pat on the back. Ren nodded at the blonde and Nora gave him a goofy salute. Naruto for his part looked neither shocked nor overly proud at hearing his being selected as the leader of the time. Instead he dropped his arms to his sides and bowed to Ozpin with a blank face, earning a raised brow from the headmaster. His teammates were just as shocked at seeing the usually smiling Uzumaki quickly become so serious. They were however relieved to see Naruto return to normal as he came up from the bow with a foxy grin on his tanned face. Walking off the stage, the now-named Team NNPR bumped into Ruby and her own little group. Ruby hugged Naruto and offered her own congratulations. The moment was ruined when Yang grabbed her fellow blonde in a headlock and began to give him a noogie. Naruto gulped as Yang leered at him playfully. Escaping from Yang's grip, Naruto turned to look at Blake. In return, the quiet teen offered Naruto a small nod of respect as her congratulations. Weiss was the odd one out as she scoffed and rolled her eyes. Naruto, already used to Weiss' type, grinned before poking her in her side, getting a surprised yelp from the Schnee heiress and laughs from everyone else. Before Weiss could do anything to get revenge, Ozpin began calling out their names and Weiss stomped off with a still giggling Ruby. And finally, Ruby rose. Weiss Schnee. Blake Belladonna. Yan Xiaolong. You 4 retrieved the Black Knight pieces. From this day forward you will work together as Team RWBY, Ruby, led by Ruby Rose. Good job, Ruby. Uzumaki said. Once more cheers erupted from the audience. Yang rushed to crush her sister in another of her hugs while Weiss looked oddly offended. Blake meanwhile stood there stoically, taking the news with her usual brand of apathy. As both teams RWBY and NNPR celebrated their successful initiation and team assignments, Ozpin looked on with a small smile. Looks like things are shaping up to be an interesting year, Ozpin muttered quietly to himself. Very. The 2 beacon teams said. What? It's Shinobi Alliance Red Naruto and RWBY. And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel. And leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.